Station. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 7 o'clock, Labour's deputy leaders told LBC a ban on social media for under-16s, which MPs are now voting on, would wrongly send the message, job done. Lucy Powell claimed a ban in Australia is easily bypassed.
70% of under-16s are still accessing social media after the bans come in, because you have to be very on it with your kids. I want the most effective measure that can protect our children.
She's calling for a consultation on online safety to be allowed to follow its course. But in the last few minutes, several MPs have told the Commons they want a ban now.
Social media has unfortunately become central to childhood, and the negatives are massively outweighing any positives.
Parents fear isolating their children from their friends who are all online.
I am doing battle with my kids as proxies to a pernicious, invasive, overwhelming force, because this force has the capacity and capability and wants to, every day, make the content more and more addictive for my children.
Labour's John Whitby, Tory Graham Stewart and Lib Dem Monica Harding. Stay with us here on LBC for the result of that Commons vote coming shortly. The police are treating an attempted arson attack on a synagogue in North London as an anti-Semitic hate crime. No one was injured when bottles thought to contain petrol were thrown at the building in Finchley overnight. LBC's Helen Hodinott is there.
This is just over 3 weeks since 4 ambulances belonging to the Jewish community were set alight in a suspected arson attack outside a synagogue in Golders Green, which is less than 5 miles from here.
These people live near the synagogue in Finchley.
Tensions are running high here as well. It shouldn't be the case. Should be able to live in harmony altogether.
It's just awful on your doorstep. You don't expect that sort of thing.
Sir Keir Starmer's insisted he will not yield to pressure from Donald Trump after the US president suggested he could change a trade deal because the Prime Minister refused to help with the Iran war. Meanwhile, the Chancellor's called the conflict a mistake, which hasn't made the world safer. It's led to more calls for this month's state visit to Washington by the King to be cancelled. Royal biographer Robert Hardman told Andrew Marr there will have been many high-level discussions on whether to go ahead.
Everyone is doing their best to frame this as a celebration of 250 years of UK-US relationship. And it's all about that, and it's not about the kind of day-to-day business.
The Health Secretary's promised faster access to help for conditions such as endometriosis under plans to improve women's healthcare in England. Wes Streeting says women have been made to feel their voices don't matter. Midwife Leah Hazard says it's a great start.
It's hopefully going to be putting some power back into women's hands in the community with online and local resources and allowing them to feed back more effectively. But what we really need is a sustained long-term commitment to ring-fencing those resources.
The senior midwife, Donna Ockenden, will lead another full independent review into maternity failings at an NHS trust. She'll add an investigation into services in Sussex to reviews into care at Nottingham and Leeds. 2 Metropolitan Police officers have been charged over the death of a pregnant woman. She was killed in a collision with a police vehicle in southeast London in 2024. Her unborn child could not be saved. Around 1 in 10 jobs could go in a fresh round of cost-cutting at the BBC. Up to 2,000 staff could leave the corporation. And 2 men have been handed the first bans for trying to enter a football match in England and Wales without a ticket. They were caught trying to tailgate their way into last month's EFL Cup final at Wembley. In the city, the FTSE 100 has closed down 49 points at 10,559. The pound buys at $1.35 and €1.15. LBC weather after a band of heavy rain clears eastern parts. Clear spells tonight, but rain in the north and west of the UK. Lows of 6 to 10 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Matt Hewitt.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Iain Dale.
Hello, a very good evening and welcome to the programme. It's 4 minutes past 7. It's Iain Dale here with you until 10. Now, we have spent a lot of time this year, and indeed last year, talking about Donald Trump, and I make no apology for the fact that we're going to do so again today. Because I ask you this question. What is the mentality of a man who continually insults a country only a matter of days now before the head of state of that country pays a state visit to his? Well, that man's name is Donald Trump. I mean, it is inconceivable to me that any normal politician would insult a country the way that he has done and think, well, it's perfectly acceptable, because he's at it again today. He's claimed that this country is overrun by immigrants, and he's essentially threatened to shelve the UK-US trade deal if Britain doesn't play ball. Now, that is not diplomatic language. Maybe we don't expect diplomatic language from Donald Trump. But this is happening with such regularity now that we cannot possibly regard the United States of America, with Donald Trump as president, as a reliable ally. If we were attacked by an adversary, let me just pick a country at random, Russia, if they launched a missile attack on Britain, do you think that Donald Trump would come to our aid? I don't. I mean, under Article 5 of the NATO treaty, he would be obliged to, but I absolutely don't believe he would. So is it time, and this is the question I really want to ask you in this hour, is it time that we have to completely reevaluate our position in terms of our own defence and pivot elsewhere? By pivot elsewhere, I mean in rapid speed, come to different arrangements with European countries for our collective security and collective defence. 0345 6060 973. Well, this was a subject raised at Prime Minister's Questions today, and our political editor, Natasha Clark, is here to tell us all about it. Natasha.
Yeah, it was. And of course, with what we've seen over recent weeks, those interviews that Donald Trump has been giving time and time again, where he seems to basically just be goaded into attacking Keir Starmer at every opportunity, it was obviously going to get raised in Prime Minister's Questions today, and it did. And it fell to Ed Davey, the Liberal Democrat leader, to basically make the case. And he, again, linked it to the visit of the King and has said that he doesn't believe that visit by the King should be going ahead at all, thinks it's sort of too much of a bit of a sort of prize for Donald Trump, and he just doesn't think that it should go ahead. This was Keir Starmer's reaction to MPs today in his response to that threat from Donald Trump over our trade deals.
My position on the Iran war has been clear from the start. We're not going to get dragged into this war. It is not our war. And a lot of pressure has been applied to me to take a different course. And that pressure included what happened last night. I'm not going to change my mind. I'm not going to yield. It is not in our national interest to join this war, and we will not do so. I know where I stand.
Reminder of what Donald Trump said earlier in the day. He was speaking in response to some of criticism that had been put to him, and he said, "It's sad. We gave them a good trade deal, better than I had to. It can always be changed. I love your country and I would love to see it succeed. But if you have bad immigration policies and bad energy policies, you have the worst of both. You can't succeed. It's not possible." So there's a lot to unpack there, isn't it? And clearly Donald Trump has said time and time again, it's immigration and energy. Those are the two reasons that he doesn't support what Keir Starmer is doing. Not that that was a problem, let's be honest, when he was enjoying our hospitality at those state trips. But what was interesting in Keir Starmer's response today at Prime Minister's Questions, and this is a new line I think that's come out from Number 10 today, or at least quite recently. He said, the special relationship is so deep and wide, it doesn't matter who is in the office and for how long. So a little bit of a sideswipe there at Donald Trump. And, obviously on the face of it, that is true. Of course, it doesn't matter who is in the White House. And that's Keir Starmer making it very clear. It doesn't really matter what our relationship is going to continue. The special relationship is not going to end just because of one man. And I think that's absolutely fair.
I thought the interesting line in that answer that we just played you there was when he said, I've come under considerable pressure. Well, we may have to wait for Keir Starmer's memoirs to find out exactly what kind of pressure. And although I don't really agree with a lot of his policy on the war in Iran, a lot of me thinks, well, yeah, good on you for standing up, because you should not yield to pressure from Donald Trump in that manner.
Yeah, absolutely. And we don't, Number 10 give us such a vague readout of those calls that the two have. So we don't really know what happens behind the scenes. But I absolutely bet they are talking about those in their conversations, their phone calls with each other. And you've seen Donald Trump do this over multiple reasons. And you saw it at the very beginning of the year over Greenland. That was exactly why Donald Trump was sort of making these vague threat, and he was threatening left, right and centre over Greenland. And that was something that, you saw Keir Starmer and other countries stand together and say, no, we're not going to stand for this. Then he backed down. So, it's hard to really take some of these threats seriously. And then you speak to people in government and they say they're not going to be sort of taking everything that Donald Trump says. They're not just going to be commenting on it, absolutely every single social media post, and neither do they want to. But they all accept that the relationship with the president has dramatically changed in the last 6 months. It's dramatically cooled. We're heading for a period where Donald Trump is going to be in the White House for another couple of years. We don't know how long Keir Starmer is going to be in Downing Street for, but the pair have to work together, and it's becoming increasingly difficult. And I think Donald Trump is being increasingly isolated. However, on the other hand, you have people that are still trying to prop up that special relationship. We saw David Lammy fly over to meet with JD Vance. They apparently still have quite a close relationship and are sort of making the case, and again with the King's visit, they are making the case that we have to continue propping up that special relationship no matter what, because it's going to be there long after Donald Trump leaves that White House.
Now, you're going to monitor the Commons vote on the social media ban that's happening at the moment, and then you'll come back and tell us all about it. What do you think is going to happen?
Yeah, look, Ian, I mean, the social media vote is obviously, it feels like a very landmark sort of time in British politics, and it feels like it's moved quite quickly, the sort of debate on social media. And we've seen all around the world people and countries taking action to ban social media from under 16s. And I think the UK will eventually follow suit. I'm not sure this is going to be tonight, because the Labour Party are insistent they want to wait for the results of that consultation. They don't just want to accept the amendment from Lord Nash tonight that is coming back from the House of Lords. But absolutely, speaking to MPs day in, day out, and they are saying parents, children, they're calling for a ban, they're calling for more action on social media. They're saying it's addictive. They are saying many things about the sort of horrors that they and their children are watching. And many people want to see that action taken. I think it's only going to be a matter of time. We might see the sort of tip of the iceberg happen today.
So Labour MPs are being whipped to vote against the amendment?
That's right. So it's the Children's Wellbeing Bill, which is going through the House of Commons at the moment. I think we will hear from the Prime Minister on this at some point. I think he will want to make the case for a ban on social media at some point. That consultation at the moment is only halfway through. He is waiting to hear back from the thousands of parents before deciding exactly how to do it. We've also heard from people in Australia that actually the ban so far isn't as strong as they hoped it would be, that actually lots of people are still seeing social media content, even though there has been a ban in place. So I think he'll be wanting to learn from the Australian government, to learn from governments around the world, to figure out exactly how they can do it to close those loopholes to make sure the same thing doesn't.
Well, we're going to be talking about this after 9 o'clock and asking if a social media ban for under 16s could actually backfire. Thank you, Natasha. We'll hear from you in just a moment on the social media ban vote in the Commons. But first, let's talk to Sam Lowe, partner of the public relations agency Flint Global, who specialises in trade policy and a former member of the UK Government Strategic Trade Advisory Group. Sam, very good evening to you. This threat from Donald Trump to maybe revisit the trade deal, how real is it?
I think it's real insofar as the trade deal has never been particularly secure, and none of his trade deals have been particularly secure. Over the course of the last year, he's threatened the EU and the trade agreement he has there. He's threatened South Korea. He's threatened Malaysia. He's threatened Indonesia. These trade agreements were never trade agreements in the way we'd normally conceive of them, as being two countries trying to improve commercial relationships between each other. These have always been about accommodating the US and damage limitation. So this risk has always been there, and as you've been discussing on the show so far, it's certainly heightened in recent weeks.
What do you think the likely outcome of all of this will be? And I mean, if he did, let's say, for example, he goes to the extreme and just cancels it, what would the negative effect on the British economy be from that?
So the deal itself, in terms of its beneficiaries, largely benefits UK exports of automotives in the first instance, also steel, and more recently pharmaceuticals in the context of some recent tariffs that are going to come into force soon. So, for example, at the moment, 100,000 vehicles a year exported to the US from the UK are levied with a 10% tariff rather than a 25% tariff, actually a 27.5% tariff, sorry. So if the deal were to go away, those vehicles would now receive a 27.5% tariff when entering the US. So that would obviously be material for those companies.
So at the moment, if you're in Los Angeles and you're thinking, I quite fancy a Range Rover, or I might buy a BMW, you might go for the Range Rover because it has a lower tariff and therefore will be better value for money.
Yeah, conceivably. So the EU's got a 15% tariff on its exports of vehicles to the US. So there's currently a 5 percentage points differential, which, of course, in the world of, a competitive marketplace is potentially...
Well, 5% on a Range Rover, and that's some money, isn't it? Now, the question we're asking our listeners is, well, look, if we pivot away from the US because we can't see them as a reliable ally in the immediate future, the alternative, I guess, is to pivot closer to the European Union. Now, do you think that there is willingness in Brussels to come to some sort of better arrangement with Britain that Britain could actually accept without Keir Starmer being accused of going back on the Brexit vote?
So I think no matter what Keir Starmer does in relation to the EU, he'll always be accused of going back on the Brexit vote, at least in the domestic politics, because there's incentives to do so. On the Brussels side, I think the issue the UK has is that it always asking for things that benefit the UK, and it very rarely thinks about, well, what does the EU get out of this? What does the EU want? So the answer to your question is yes, the EU will go further on the trade relationship with the UK when it views it as being in its interest to do so. So we're seeing that happen at the moment with energy trading and with trade in food, where they want to remove some barriers. If that isn't if they don't view it as beneficial, they might ask for something else instead. So they might ask for more money. They might ask for more students to be able to come to the UK. And if the UK isn't able to give that, then it won't necessarily get what it wants. So my concern at the moment is that there's still some naivety on the UK side that people are going, well, the US relationship is now looking rocky again. Let's go back towards the EU, and it's going to be simple. When, as we know from, it's nearly 10 years on from the Brexit vote at this point, and none of that was simple. That took a long time, and we're still talking about it today.
But how much is the defence issue related to this? Because the EU is not a defence pact.
No.
But increasingly, since the war started in Ukraine with the Russian invasion, Britain and the EU have acted as one. There hasn't really been a split between them. How can Britain use that issue to effectively get a better relationship with the EU?
So I think the defence environment has actually helped the UK in terms of its conversations with the EU, and also particularly with particular member states. But we have seen very recently efforts to deepen the relationship between the UK and the EU over defence fall apart over the question of money. How much was the UK going to pay in? So I think it is certainly something that the UK has to offer the rest of Europe, and something that particular member states within Europe want. But it's not, sort of I'm going to use American terminology now, a home run.
Yeah, well done.
In the first instance.
Sam, thank you very much indeed. That's Sam Lowe from Flint Global. Now, breaking news, MPs have just rejected a social media ban for under-16s. 256 MPs voted against the proposal, compared with 150 in favour. The government is holding a consultation into introducing such a ban, though, which will continue through until the end of May. So that happened because Labour MPs were effectively whipped to vote against the social media ban, but that doesn't mean to say that it won't come in the future. Natasha Clark will be returning to this seat right next to me in just a moment to give her interpretation of this vote result. You're listening to LBC. I'm Iain Dale. It's 18 minutes past 7.
This is LBC.
Calling all young creatives. Kickstart your career in media. Apply now and join us in years 10 or 12 at Global Academy. globalacademy.com.
Get ready to rock with a new Volkswagen T-Roc. With £2,000 towards your finance deposit on the new Volkswagen T-Roc with Solutions PCP 7.9% APR representative. Test drive the T-Roc today and see why it won What Car's Best Small SUV Award. Ordered by the 4th of May 2026. Indemnities may be required. Volkswagen Financial Services.
When you're smiling. Banning Dental Group clinics with over 5,000 top-rated Google reviews. Keep on smiling.
At EDF, we don't just encourage you to use less electricity. We actually reward you for it. That's why, when you use less during peak times on weekdays, we give you free electricity on Sundays. How you use it is up to you. EDF. Change is in our power. Households who reduce their weekday peak electricity usage by 50% can earn up to 16 hours of free electricity per week, subject to fair usage. For all T's and C's, visit edfenergy.com/r-power.
This is LBC with Iain Dale. Call 0345 6060 973.
7:20 on LBC. Just when you thought it was safe, she's back. Natasha Clark is here. What's happened?
MPs have voted down that amendment, as we predicted, Ian. They were, I don't think, going to vote for this. Just there's not the majority in the House of Commons for this ban on social media.
But if there wasn't a whip, there would be, wouldn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. MPs, and especially Labour MPs, are fully behind this ban. And, we've had people on LBC talk about this. They are talking to parents, they're talking to children. Everybody's crying out for the government to take action on this. It's now just a matter of when it happens. It's not a matter of if it's going to happen. I do think the government will go through with a ban on social media for under 16s at some point. Now, the government are about halfway through their consultation, and they are saying that they've received quite a number of submissions to that consultation so far. But the Minister, Olivia Bailey, who's just been speaking in the House of Commons, was talking about basically the decision why they haven't done so now. She has said it is a matter of how the government will act, not if. She said that consultation is due to conclude next month. She said that the amendment today was a narrow amendment proposed in the House of Lords. She said our consultation allows us to address a much wider range of services and features. And that's actually, to be fair, what Keir Starmer has repeatedly talked about. He talks about the fact that when you're scrolling on social media, there's no end point. So essentially the addictive nature is built into the design. He's talked about chatbots. He's talked about Grok on social media and other AI tools that he feels are misleading to children especially. So there is an argument, I think, from the government, and I think it is a fair one, that when they do bring forward legislation, it will not just be a blanket ban. It will be other features of smartphones, of social media that genuinely go further than just a blanket ban. So I think that's the government's argument, is we're going to do it properly. We don't just want to accept an amendment. We're just going to blanket ban it. We want to know what it looks like. And obviously there are serious questions for what those loopholes might look like. Like I say, look to Australia. If you've got more than half of teens still able to access it, it's not working. So what's the point in putting it in place if it doesn't work?
I'm going to push back on that, because I don't think you're ever going to get a piece of legislation that works 100% here, because there will always be clever teenagers who can get around it.
Of course.
But if you can prevent half of teenagers from doing it, then to my mind, that's not ideal.
I agree.
It ought to be more than that. But it's a good start.
Sure, but it's also not how legislation should be, I think, created, right? So if you're going to create a bit of legislation with the aim to keep all teenagers off it, you should be looking for how to close all of those loopholes. And I think that's why they want to take the time. And they are looking to countries around the world for a little bit of advice, a little bit of tips on how to get it right. And I think that is absolutely fair.
We're falling behind a bit, aren't we? Because there's quite a few countries that have gone down this road.
Yeah,
Australia,
several.
I think, was the first, but I know Greece has now done it. And several
France,
Scandinavian
Denmark,
countries.
some other Scandinavian nations have all just announced that they are going to do it or about to do it. And I think the question for Sir Keir Starmer is, why are you waiting? And obviously, many people are talking about the harms from social media. And, there's books, there's experts talking about the sort of ongoing harm to children. The question he needs to answer, I think, is why are you waiting so long to implement this when other countries around the world and parents are urging you to go faster?
So given the consultation doesn't end until the end of May, is it like to be in the King's speech on the 13th of May?
I think it will be. I think there will be something that the government will then attach this legislation to. I think it is clearly a priority for him. I think he has talked repeatedly about this. And you saw this at the beginning of the year with Elon Musk and Grok. The government really wanted to lean into that argument of child protection, and they see it as something that they have a bit of a wedge between themselves and Nigel Farage, for example, and the Reform Party. They see it as a bit of a battleground for them. But equally, they are getting the pressure from Labour backbenchers on this, and MPs, including, I think, Fred Thomas from the Labour Party, has been pushing this very, very hard behind the scenes. And you're seeing so many parents, I think, also calling out for the government to do more, to guide parents through what is a very tricky time. And the government have started to act on that. They've introduced guidance on screen time for under fives, for example. And I think this is just the next step of what they're going to do. Some MPs, and I was listening to the debate earlier on in their Commons, are sort of talking about it in terms of a safety aspect, a bit like we used to talk about cars. There was a huge debate when we put seatbelts in cars. And everybody said, oh, why on earth do we need to do this? Is it really necessary? But actually looking back 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years later, people are going, we can't actually see a world where we wouldn't have a car with a seatbelt.
I remember when that debate was going on, this was in the early 1980s, and just before the vote in the House of Commons, I had a head-on crash at 50 miles an hour, not wearing a seatbelt.
And therefore you could never say anything about seatbelts ever again.
I was against seatbelts at that time.
Did it change your mind?
It did change my mind,
there
absolutely.
You go. But yeah, and Keir Starmer has his own teenage children, and they are, to be fair, a little bit older, and they probably are past the age where actually if you put a ban on social media, it's probably not going to have an impact on them. But I think every parent is crying out for guidance from the government on this subject and about what they should do. And obviously the government's approach has always been on this, hasn't it? Let's let the tech firms regulate themselves. Let's push them into taking action. But when you have got people like Elon Musk in charge of social media sites like X, there is only so far that argument works. And like I say, I think the pressure from other countries around the world, the pressure from his own backbenchers, we talk about Keir Starmer's popularity and about doing things that people want. This is actually something that people want the government to actually do. And I think Keir Starmer has woken up to the possibility that actually this will be a really popular policy.
Well, I'll tell you what, one way of popularising this policy will be to introduce an amendment saying, and we ban the President of the United States from using social media.
It's true. I think that probably would have a lot of support as well.
That's a neat radio link between that story and this one. Natasha, thank you very much indeed. So we're going to return to talking about whether we should pivot away from the United States because we can't rely on the United States. I never thought I would ever say that, because it's been the staple of our international defence, our international diplomacy for decades now. But here we are. Chris is in Richmond. Hello, Chris.
Hello. I think you know where I'm going to go with this, don't you?
Probably do, Chris.
Yeah, well, I think the state visit, I wasn't sure about David's call to cancel it, but frankly, I think he was right. I mean, frankly, Trump, by most people's assessment, there is something mentally wrong with the guy. Right, and I take that. I say that lightly. I don't say that lightly. Having had mental health challenges myself, there is clearly some serious issues when you look at his social media feed and his behaviour the last few days. We need to go back to being friends with the European Union, don't we?
Well, I think we are. I mean, I don't think we've ever not been friends with them. I mean, okay, it's been a bumpy ride over the last 10 years. But I think since Rishi Sunak became Prime Minister and since Keir Starmer became Prime Minister, I think relations have got a bit, they're on an upward graph.
No, I agree, but all the Brexiteers will cry foul and say how terrible it is we shouldn't be rule takers. Well, you put us in the situation in the first place. So Kemi Badenoch, I'm not interested to hear what you've got to say about it.
Well, I think Brexit. Yeah, but that. Well, so as you know, so did I. I don't think that is a valid argument, because I don't think any sovereign nation really will ever want to take rules that they haven't had any influence over. I don't think that's an extreme position.
Well, yeah, but the reality is the Brexiteers, sorry to keep going back to it, wanted it both ways. They wanted control over immigration, but told us there wouldn't be consequences, even though it has had a significant impact on prices, particularly, which are even more exacerbated by the Iran war, et cetera, et cetera. The other point I wanted to make, right, is just the ridiculous posture of some of our politicians like Farage. He's literally been bad-mouthing this country going to America, effectively almost calling for sanctions to be put on this country. The fact that people in this country think that he might be suited to be Prime Minister, I cannot grasp, Ian. Can you help me understand that?
Well, I think, like any politician, appeals to certain demographics of people. And Nigel Farage, I think he appeals predominantly, not exclusively, but predominantly to those people who have lost faith in established politicians and established political parties and want to say a plague on all of your houses. And they see Nigel Farage as an alternative. They may not actually genuinely believe that he might be any different, but they want to give him a go.
Well, maybe, but I just, everything he said is just, it's like J.D. Vance. These proved to be completely and utterly wrong. Kemi last year, when it came to trade, Trump will be a force for good in the world just after he got elected. I mean, that's just proven to be the most absurd statement in the last 2 years. It just makes these people look ridiculous. Trump is not fit for purpose to be president. We have to maintain relationships fine, but we should not be having a state visit. The guy doesn't deserve it. He's bad-mouthed our military. He's played down our role in Afghanistan when, hundreds of our own soldiers died or were critically injured. I think it's a disgrace.
Well, the die is cast on that. I mean, you cannot cancel a state visit 10 days ahead of it. And let's face it, over her life, the Queen made state visits to some awful regimes. It's part of the job. It's not the King that has decided to go. It's the government that has decided he should go. But there is no way that can be cancelled now.
Well, quite possibly not, but I do think that it was. I understand why Starmer did it, because unfortunately people feel that Trump is a narcissist and we have to play to his ego. But unfortunately, kowtowing to bullies doesn't work. I'm not saying we don't work with them, but I think in hindsight it was the wrong decision.
Well, hindsight is a wonderful thing, isn't it? And
it is.
As you say, when it was agreed that he would do this, the relations between Starmer and Trump were on a different level. I think if he was to make the same decision today, I think it would probably be a different one. Jamie has texted to say, Iain Dale, so dumb. Well, you may be right, but I mean, if you're going to call me dumb, at least you might explain why you think I'm being dumb. I don't think I've said anything that's particularly dumb, or not any dumber than usual anyway. 7:30 on LBC, more of your calls to come. Matt Hewitt has the LBC News headlines.
In the last half hour, a ban on social media for under-16s has been rejected by MPs. The Lords had introduced the measure to a schools bill. A consultation on a ban, among other measures to protect children online, will continue for another month. The police are looking for two people after an attempted arson attack on a London synagogue in the early hours of this morning. Jewish leaders in Finchley say they're extremely grateful no one was hurt, but the emotional and psychological impact is significant. And the Chancellor has called the Iran war a mistake after Donald Trump threatened to change a trade deal with the UK over its response to the conflict. America's president says the special relationship has fallen into a sad state. LBC weather after a band of heavy rain clears eastern parts. Clear spells tonight, but rain in the north and west of the UK at times. Lows of 6 to 10 degrees.
LBC. How about Specsave ears?
Not sure.
Did you get it? Specsave ears?
Yeah, but no.
Oh, OK. Specs, and we also do hearing too savers.
Think about it. Should have gone to Specs, and we also do hearing too savers. Can't see it catching on.
OK, so we're saying Specsavers do eyes and ears. Senses savers.
Technically true.
Yeah.
But actually terrible.
Oh.
At Specsavers, we're hearing experts too, and have been for over 20 years.
Oh, should we just stick to Specsavers then?
Yeah.
Book a free hearing check today.
When you're smiling. Banning Dental Group clinics with over 5,000 top-rated Google reviews. Keep on smiling.
Experience. It's knowing when something is worth waiting for and when it isn't. That's why Saga Health Insurance offers unlimited GP appointments whenever you need them. With a choice of flexible plans, prompt tests and treatment, your health is taken care of. And right now, you'll get a £250 gift card when you take out Saga Health Insurance. Search Saga Health Insurance for a quote today. Start a new policy before the 28th of May. New customers over 50 only. Terms and conditions apply.
At Ocado, you'll save 25% on your first shop and get free delivery, which means if you were to buy a 4-cheese pizza, you'd basically be getting one of the cheeses for free. Save and splurge at Ocado, the online supermarket.
Geographical and other restrictions. Min spend £60 and charges apply. Discount available on food. New customers only. Max saving £20. Terms at ocado.com.
Iain Dale on LBC.
Rich says, my daughter, aged 14, is at school in Australia. She started in January and wanted to use a VPN to get around the ban. In the end, she just used a friend with face recognition and it approved her. So easy to get around and impossible to enforce by the state. Well, we'll be talking much more about that after 9 o'clock. Let me tell you who's on Cross Question at 8. Alex Burkhardt, Conservative Shadow Cabinet Office Minister and Shadow Northern Ireland Secretary and MP for Brentwood and Ongar. Andrew Lewin, who's Labour MP for Welwyn Hatfield. Edward Morello is Liberal Democrat MP for East Dorset. And Lara Brown, Commissioning Editor for The Spectator. They'll be here to take your calls after 8. Now, before we come to back to your calls on Donald Trump and should Britain be pivoting away from its relationship with the United States, let's look at another terrible story that's happened today, because 2 suspects are being sought after an attempted arson attack at a synagogue in North London, in which 2 bottles thought to contain petrol were hurled at the building. Now, the attack on the Finchley Reformed Synagogue is being treated as an anti-Semitic hate crime, according to police. Well, Helen Hodinott joins us, LBC's reporter who's been covering this story today. Helen, tell us more.
So, Iain, the MP for Finchley and Golders Green, Sarah Sackman, has today called this a shocking attempt to harm a local synagogue, with last night's attempted arson attack taking place just over 3 weeks this after Hatzolah ambulances belonging to the Jewish community were set alight outside a synagogue in Golders Green, just 2.5 miles away. In Finchley, just after midnight last night, 2 suspects wearing balaclavas and dark clothing approached the synagogue and threw a brick and also 2 bottles thought to contain petrol at the building, which has a high protective metal fence around it. Neither of those bottles caught fire and no damage or injuries were reported. But staff arriving this morning found evidence of the attempt and reported it to police, who, as you say, are treating it as an anti-Semitic hate crime. And officers are now trying to find suspects. No arrests have been made so far. I've been speaking to people who live next to the synagogue.
An almighty bang. It sounded like a boulder had hit the floor. And it's scary. Tensions are running high here as well. It shouldn't be the case because it's, shouldn't be transporting these kind of conflicts to here. Should be able to live in harmony altogether.
It's just awful, all on your doorstep. You don't expect that sort of thing. Yeah, no, awful thing to have happened.
Yeah, I just feel really sorry for everybody who uses, that centre. It must be really terrifying for them.
Well, today, Detective Chief Superintendent Luke Williams, who leads policing in the area, said they are aware of the significant concern that this incident will cause in the community, particularly in the wake of the arson attack in Golders Green last month. In a statement, Finchley Reform Synagogue, which was the one targeted last night, said, "We are extremely grateful that nobody was hurt and that our building is also unharmed, but we know that the emotional and psychological impact of today's events is significant."
Helen, thank you. That's Helen Hoddinott, LBC's reporter. James says, why are you still trying to make sense of a president who is clearly mentally unbalanced? Yes, we should pivot elsewhere, both for defence and trade. If only there were a rich, mature, democratic continent of 400 million people on our doorstep. Oh, wait. Gordon's in Knighton. Hello, Gordon.
Hello, Ian. I didn't realise you were a comedian.
Nor did I.
Earlier on, you said, are the Americans trustworthy allies? And I just burst out laughing.
I don't know why you found that comedic.
Well, it's obviously ridiculous. They're not our allies, are they?
Well, they are at the moment. I mean, they've been our allies Vance for decades.
Said recently about the senior service, the big bad Navy, which is patronising in the extreme.
It's got an element of truth about it, though, hasn't it? Given the fact that we had only one destroyer to send to the Mediterranean.
Well, we sent one,
And by the way, it was Pete Hegseth that said that, not J.D. Vance.
Well, thank you for correcting me, Ian.
Any time.
Yeah. I also the problem about the Lagos Islands. Trump was really upset about our Prime Minister saying that he couldn't fly his airplanes from there,
he's got every right to be
patronising against our sovereignty.
No, I don't agree with that. He's got every right to be upset by that, I think. And of course, that decision was reversed within 2 days. It's the gratuitous insults that I think people are offended by. We can all have views on various things. I mean, I think Donald Trump has been right on opposing the Chagos deal that Keir Starmer did, that would cost the British taxpayer £30 billion. I think Donald Trump was right on that. But he's not right in the language that he uses to insult our armed forces, to insult our Prime Minister and to insult our country. And therefore, we have every right to question whether at the moment the United States is the kind of ally that we've experienced over the past 60 or 70 years.
Well, that's the reason why I laughed out loud at your comedic introduction. Are the Americans trustworthy allies?
I was asking a question.
Well, it may.
I mean, if you found that funny, I mean, wait till later in the programme, and I'll try and tell a proper joke that'll get you off your seat.
All right, mate. Yeah, I'll wait for you to tell your joke,
All right. Okay. Thank you very much indeed, Gordon. David is in South Woodford. Hi, David.
Oh, hello. The point I want to make is 2 points. Firstly, everyone phones up and saying, Trump is mad. He's not mad, because if he was mad, I know he's a nasty person, he's a narcissist, but he's not mad because he, as commander-in-chief, is in charge of whether nuclear bombs are used. Now, the powers that be in America would not allow a president to go insane and be in charge. So that's my first point.
Well, just on that, I mean, you have to be a little bit, well, just say off balance, don't you, to insult the country whose head of state is about to go do a state visit to your country. I mean, that is the definition of insanity.
Yes. I mean, no, I don't think it is. He's lashing out because he hasn't got his way over the Strait of Hormuz. He's lashed out at Macron, the German Chancellor, even yesterday at the Italian Prime Minister.
Yeah.
So he's a close. He used to be a close ally of hers.
Yeah, exactly. But doesn't that indicate a lack of balance of mind when you've literally alienated every single one of your allies in NATO?
Well, I mean, that comes to my second point, which is we need to move away from America because the whole Republican movement is based on America first, which means put the interest of America before any global partnerships. So if the Republicans are in power, we really need to start thinking about how we're going to be independent of America rather than following their heel. And if I can quote Henry Kissinger, when he said that to be America's enemy is dangerous, but to be their friend is fatal. Which basically what he was trying to say was when you become too close to America, you abandon your own interests and your own the direction your country is going in. So I think we need to be a bit more independent and think for ourselves.
Okay, David, thank you very much. You should be ashamed of yourself for the conversation you just had, said Shane. Again, no explanation of why I should be ashamed of myself. Anyway, David's in Newcastle. Hello, David.
Hi, Ian. Nice to speak to you again.
Hi.
Do you think the Americans have ever been reliable?
Yes.
I mean, they didn't come leading into World War II until 1941 when Japan attacked them and Germany declared war on them. Then they came in.
Yeah, it's slightly more nuanced than that because President Roosevelt himself had laid all the foundations to come in, but at that time the American public was very isolationist, so he wouldn't have been able to get it past Congress. So yes, they were late to it, but I mean I think since then America has essentially funded NATO since then, and through the Cold War was our main ally.
So when Brexit was going on, Obama said that we would be at the back of the queue for a list. Then you had Trump, who didn't care. Then you had Biden, who was ineffectual. And now you've got Trump that's gone off the rails on the second time. He's caused a whole world blow up.
Yeah,
the economy. Yeah. And people say that he's mentally well. I don't think so. I mean, that photograph or that AI thing he put out as Jesus, what was that about?
Well, look, I'm not going to disagree with you. I have tried my best, not just in Trump's second term, but also his first term. I've tried my best to be fair. And when he's done something I agree with, I will say so. And when he does something I don't agree with, I say so. But frankly, over the past, well, really, throughout a lot of his second term, there hasn't been a lot of the latter, has there?
No, there certainly hasn't. I mean, yes, I agree with what he's done with Iran. He could have done it better, but the regime needed to be brought to heel because the Iranian people couldn't endure that for much longer, surely.
Well, I tried to give him the benefit of the doubt when the war started and said, well, if it does result in the end of the Iranian regime, everybody's going to be quite pleased about that. But it hasn't done that, and it doesn't look as if it's likely to. David, thank you. James is in Gravesend. Hello, James.
Hello, Ian, my friend.
Hi. Are you there, James? Well, that was a short one, wasn't it? Let's read out this text here from Martin, who says, Trump hates European democracies and our system in Britain. He envies our constitutional monarchy and would like to be anointed king himself. He doesn't understand us or how our democracy works. Bear in mind, Donald Trump is actually half British. I think that's being slightly unfair. He knows exactly how our democracy works. Anyway, he continues. He's accusing us of not supporting the US in the war against Iran and holding this against us so that when Russia extends its war against Europe, he won't feel committed to reciprocating and supporting us and will remind us, you didn't support us in the war against Iran, so we won't come running to your assistance in the war against Russia. Trump and Putin between them ultimately want to see the breakup of the EU and share the spoils between them. Well, I agree with the first bit of that. I don't think that if we were under threat, I don't think if any NATO country was under threat, America now would go to their aid. So you have to ask, what is the point of NATO? Right, James is back after that brief interlude. James, fire away.
Hello, Ian. How are you?
I'm very well.
Good. Now, I've been following this whole situation where everybody's falling in. Trump's mad. He's mad. He's mad. He's bonkers. I have a different take on it, okay? Now, we know that the previous president was in cognitive decline, okay? That was well evident.
Yep.
Now, Trump is in his mid-70s, I think. And I think there may be an issue.
He's 79. I think he'll be 80 next year.
Well, I think there's probably a degree of cognitive decline. But that's different from calling someone mad, okay? So my father, who died when he was 86, he was in cognitive decline, and you could see it was but he wasn't mad. Now, when it comes to his bellicose language about this country, people need to grow a bit of a backbone, okay? And, that's Donald, okay? He said, oh, well, you're not a reliable ally. Or we think America's not a reliable ally. But then the boot is on the other foot then. Conversely, he could say, well, you're not a reliable ally. When I asked you for help, you just stood back. You've all said that Iran poses an existential threat, but none of you will do anything about it. You all sit on your backsides, just doing lip service. Well, I'm going to do something about it. But the problem with him doing something about it is there's no plan. They thought, well, let's bomb them into submission. Well, everybody knows that doesn't work. You have to have combined arms. If you want to get rid of a regime, look what we did with Iraq. It wasn't just bombing. We had foot soldiers on the ground. But then we were working under a UN mandate, sort of. But with Labour, they're still haunted by the spectre of Iraq, okay? And I think that the spectre of Iraq really gets them thinking, we don't want to get involved in this. We don't want to get involved in that. We don't want to get involved in this.
Yeah, and that has led to this more isolationist feeling. I mean, isolationism has always been latent in American society. And if you look back in history, in the late 19th, in the 19th century, the whole of that century was effectively America being isolationist. It was only really at the beginning of the 20th century where that began to change, but quite slowly. But ever since the Second World War, America has been, it was one of the two superpowers, as America and the Soviet Union, in the Cold War era. And I think you're right that the war in Iraq has almost brought to life this sort of latent isolationism among the American people. And we're now seeing the consequence of that. And Donald Trump is the exemplification of it.
I completely agree with you. Now, in terms of NATO, that's a defensive alliance. And we all know it's a defensive alliance. But then, of course, you have this Article 5, and an attack on one is attack on all. So, but will it actually work out that in reality? I don't think so. So, say Russia attacked Estonia in NATO, and I think what will happen, there'll be a committee meeting, and then somebody will say, we're not getting involved, we're not going to vote to get involved, and then nobody gets involved.
Well, I'm not sure about the latter bit. I don't believe that America under Trump would come to the aid of a NATO ally that was attacked by Russia. And I think all of this debate on this over the past few months has emboldened Vladimir Putin. That's what this has done. In some ways, you could say the whole war in the Middle East has emboldened Vladimir Putin as well, because he's raking in the oil money again. Thank you very much, James. We'll come to more calls in a moment. You're listening to LBC. Don't forget, cross question at 8. It's 7:48.
on the latest episode of The Newsagents.
Should MPs ban social media for the under-16s on their smartphones and devices? It's been tried in Australia. It's got popular public support, so why isn't Keir Starmer backing it yet?
Get the latest episode of The Newsagents with Emily Maitlis, John Sopel and Lewis Goodall. Listen or watch on our free Global Player app or the LBC app.
Hey you! Yeah, you! What would you like from your investing app? 6% interest on your ISA, a free share of your choice, or no commission on stocks and ETFs up to €100,000 per month? With XTB, you get all of the above all in one app, the XTB app. Get your free share and start investing with XTB today. XTB, where your money works.
Capital at risk. Investment values can rise or fall. Limited free stock availability. 2% ISA rate boost for 90 days. New clients only. T's and C's apply.
Selling your car can be super simple if you choose We Buy Any Car instead of a confusing part exchange. Because with We Buy Any Car, you'll have cash in the bank for more bargaining power on your next car. If only they could make getting to that countryside wedding simpler.
Make a U-turn. Make a U-turn.
Oh no. We Buy Any Car. Selling made simple. To get a quote in 30 seconds, enter your reg number now at webuyanycar.com.
Buying a home on a holiday park was the retreat you always wanted. But then came unexpected site fee increases. And that was before the dramatic loss in value. If you bought a home on a holiday park in the UK, you may have been missold. holidayparkadvicecentre.co.uk could help you receive thousands in compensation. Text ASSIST to 78900. That's ASSIST to 78900.
It's hard to concentrate when you're worried about your health. It can feel like there's a wall between you and the rest of the world. Like you can't be fully present.
Hello, AXA Health. How can I help?
At AXA Health Insurance, we build our teams with people who care. So when you need us, we're here to support you. For cover that cares, search AXA Health Insurance. Pre-existing conditions are not covered.
Iain Dale, text 84850. This is LBC.
Andy says Donald Trump isn't wrong. Carbon tax and the zero carbon agenda is destroying growth in our country. We have completely open borders. No, we don't. We have no idea who's coming into our country. Well, we don't know every single person, but by and large we do. What is wrong with you people, says Andy. Well, I'll tell you why I think a lot of people, including me, take exception to what Donald Trump has been saying. Frankly, the affairs of this country are to do with the British people. They have nothing to do with the President of the United States. It is unprecedented for a foreign leader to try to interfere in the internal policy-making decisions of a British government. You wouldn't find any British Prime Minister doing that to an American president. It's never happened before. You would not find any... I'm trying to think of any other American president, certainly in my lifetime, that would have done this, and there isn't one. It's just unprecedented for this to happen. You concentrate on the domestic policies in your own country, and fine, you can privately disagree with what another country is doing, and if it has an impact on your country, then fair enough. But the fact that our country has a particular immigration policy or a particular energy policy, it's got nothing to do with Donald Trump. And yet he seems to be holding it against us, trying to act as if we're some sort of colonial interest of America. Well, 250 years, but it was on the other foot, wasn't it? David's in Balham. Hello, David.
Oh, hi, good evening, Ian.
Hello.
When the King gets back from America, Donald Trump is going to commence a series of claims. He's going to claim that the King told him everything in secret, which he can't repeat. However, in the same breath, he's going to attack Mayor Khan, he's going to attack Keir Starmer, but perhaps more importantly, he's going to stir up racial hatred in Britain by telling the so-called patriots that you can go ahead and take your country back because the King told me it will be all right. I can't tell you what the King said. it's a secret, but the king's in favour of you patriots going back and taking your country, and there's going to be blood on the streets. I cannot believe that we're sending Donald Trump, we're sending our king to America to meet Donald Trump. I'm a black ex-serviceman. I served 10 years with the Royal Green Jackets, and I will feel betrayed if we send the king to America, knowing full well that nothing good can come out of this visit. Nothing.
Well, I'm going to remember your call, David, because if that does actually happen, we'll replay it. Thank you very much. Let's go to Richard in Brentford. Hello, Richard.
Hi, Ian. I'm really interested in what you think. Did America really decide to help NATO and commit its forces just to help us? My understanding of history is that America wanted bases in European countries which were closer to Russia and would be in their interest to protect America. So,
it was a mutual interest.
Yeah, but they wouldn't have done it, would they, unless it was for their benefit?
Well, you have to go back to the circumstances after World War II, don't you? Because obviously America controlled part of Germany for some time after World War II. And when it became clear that the Soviet Union posed a real threat, it was clear. General Patton warned years during the war that if it wasn't the Allies that got to Berlin first, that would be a very bad decision in the long term, because effectively Stalin would then use the whole of Eastern Europe as effectively a satellite states, and that's exactly what happened. So as the post-war years developed, it was clear that it was in America's interest to keep bases in Europe because of the Soviet threat.
Absolutely, for their interest. So has that changed?
In Donald Trump's mind, it has changed because he doesn't see Putin as a threat at all.
But surely the strategists, the sensible people who remain in America, have the same view, and surely it's still in their interests to maintain bases in these foreign countries.
Well, I think it probably is. But they're not president. And the president, we know, is, not all powerful in America, because there are some checks and balances on the powers of the president. But if you have a president like Trump and you have various strategists sort of saying to the president, no, you're wrong on this, we need to do it this way, we all know what he does. He just fires them. It's a bit like a Roman emperor in some ways.
But I'm surprised there aren't commentators in America who are saying, hang on a minute, it's not a one-way street. We get advantages out of helping NATO and joining together with European countries.
Well, there are people that say that, but they're not the ones in power.
We don't hear it.
That's the problem.
You never hear it. Never hear. All I hear is this crazy man Trump.
Yeah, because he's so loud and what he says is always so newsworthy. I think this is a real problem for sort of organisations like ours, where there is part of you that is so sick and tired of covering Donald Trump. You think, do we have to do it again? But if we don't do it, then we're accused of hiding Trump's, a bit like the American media, of being accused of hiding Biden's increasing senility. And they were guilty of that. They covered it up. If we go down that road and we don't report what Trump is saying and the implications of what Trump is saying, well, we're as bad as them.
Well, you're never going to be as bad as them, but I get your point. But why don't people sometimes just replay some of the things he says to him? So, 1 week he takes a position. A few days later, it's completely the reverse. And then he changes again. All it takes is some journalist to stand up and say, hey, President, this is what you said 3 days ago.
And he doesn't care.
Doesn't because it? But at least it will be presented and will be reported.
His main aim in life is for it all to be about him. He is the biggest narcissist that I've ever come across in politics. And believe me, I've come across a few. I've never come across this before, where it's all got to be bigger and better, and we're the best, and we're the greatest, and we're the most powerful. And he thinks that all reflects on him because he's made America the biggest, the best, and the all-powerful. What he doesn't understand, though, is that outside his MAGA base, Most of us can see through that now. Even some of us who may have been slightly taken in his first term and have given him the benefit of the doubt on some of the things he's got right, we see him now, don't we? That's the problem.
We need to shout it, though. We need to say it and say it in the press conferences. Why don't people stand up in the press conference?
Because I'll never get a question again if they do. Again, I mean,
that's more important.
Well,
that's more important than telling the truth.
It's difficult, isn't it? Because if you're working for one of the major networks in America and you get on the wrong side of the president, your career's toast, frankly. Now, it shouldn't be like that. It doesn't. It really doesn't operate like that in this country, or not to that extent, anyway.
No.
There's always a little bit of a game that you have to play because, I know. I had Ed Davey on the other day. If I launched into some vicious attack on him, he's never going to come on again. But I think I asked him some tough questions, and he enjoyed it, and I thought it was a really good hour. But there is always this sort of give and take but if you go too far, whether you're the politician or the interviewer, you know that there can be consequences for that. That's just reality. Thank you very much indeed. Some great calls in that hour. Thanks for all of them. Coming up in the next hour, it is Wednesday's Cross Question. We'll be joined by 3 MPs in the studio, plus a journalist. We have Alex Burkhardt from the Conservatives. He is the Shadow Cabinet Office Minister and Shadow Northern Ireland Secretary. He's MP for Brentwood and Ongar. Andrew Lewin making his debut on the programme, a Labour MP for Welland and Hatfield. Edward Morello also making his debut, Liberal Democrat MP for East Dorset. And Laura Brown, commissioning editor of The Spectator. They'll be here to take your calls in just a few seconds' time. 0345 6060 973. You can WhatsApp us on that number. You can text 84850, and you can watch us on Global Player, the LBC app, and the LBC YouTube channel.
On your radio, on the LBC app, and
Play LBC.
Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 8 o'clock, a ban on social media for under-16s has been rejected by MPs. The Lords had introduced the measure to a schools bill. A consultation on a ban, among other measures to protect children online, will continue for another month. Here's LBC's political editor, Natasha Clark.
The Labour Party are insistent they want to wait for the results of that consultation. They don't just want to accept the amendment from Lord Nash tonight, but absolutely speaking to MPs day in, day out, and they are saying parents, children, they're calling for a ban, they're calling for more action on social media. They're saying it's addictive.
Police are looking for 2 men suspected of trying to throw petrol bombs at a synagogue in North London. The incident in Finchley in the early hours of this morning is being treated as an attempted hate crime. There's been no easing of tensions between the UK and US over Iran, with the Prime Minister saying he won't yield to President Trump and the Chancellor calling the war a mistake. Rachel Reeves said the war hasn't made the world safer. Donald Trump's suggested changing the UK's trade deal. And 2 men have been handed the first bans for trying to enter a football match without a ticket. They were caught trying to tailgate into last month's EFL Cup final at Wembley. In the city, the FTSE 100 has closed down 49 points at 10,559. The pound buys $1.35 and €1.15. LBC weather, clear spells but rain in the north and west of the UK, a low of 6 degrees. From Global's newsroom, for LBC, I'm Daryl Jackson.
Taking antibiotics when you don't need them puts you and your family at risk of a longer and more severe illness. Always take your doctor's advice. Search NHS antibiotics.
You saw me, walking along the beach. You watched me turn round the headland, and the tide, it cut me off. The rocks were wet, too wet to climb, so I panicked. But you didn't. You dialed 999 and asked for the Coast Guard.
Coast Guard.
And I just want to say, whoever you are, thank you.
In an emergency at the coast, call 999 and ask for the Coast Guard.
I'm a real snack monster. But Mum and Dad says all that munching isn't good for me. Around half the sugar we eat comes from unhealthy snacks and sugary drinks. If you want to change from a snack monster to a snack star, search Change for Life for loads of healthy snacking ideas.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation. Cross Question with Iain Dale.
Hello, a very good evening. Welcome to Wednesday's Cross Question. It's 3 minutes past 8. Let me introduce my panel to you. Alex Burkhardt, sitting next to me on my left, is Conservative Shadow Cabinet Office Minister and Shadow Northern Ireland Secretary and MP for Brentwood and Ongar. Next to him, making his debut, is Andrew Lewin, Labour MP for Welland and Hatfield. To my right, Lara Brown is Commissioning Editor of The Spectator. And next to her is Edward Morello, Liberal Democrat MP for East Dorset, who is not, as I said, making his debut because he has been on the programme before. I do remember, you're not forgettable, Edward, but I apologise. Right, coming up, your questions on 0345 6060 973. You can WhatsApp us on that number, text 84850, and you can watch us on Global Player, the LBC app, and the LBC YouTube channel.
Call 0345 6060 973. Text 84850. Cross Question. Watch live on our free Global Player app or the LBC app.
Right, let's start off with a text question from Carl in Dorset. For the man behind the art of the deal, is there any point in doing a deal with Donald Trump? Well, as we discussed in the last hour, Trump has threatened to change the UK-US trade deal because Keir Starmer has repeatedly refused to commit our armed forces to the war with Iran. Alex?
Yeah, and I think there's... America is still... the most important country in the world. It's still one of our closest allies, and yes, we currently have a president who one has to take seriously, even if one can't take literally. And of course you've got to do deals with the president of the United States.
But if he just reneges on them, or threatens to renege on them.
Yes, but threatening isn't doing, is it? This is what I mean about taking seriously, but not literally. And so I think the alternative is a very bleak place. The idea that the UK would just internally try and turn its back on the US, I think, is something that almost nobody is advocating.
Your choice of words earlier was interesting because you said it's one of our main allies. It's always been our main ally, hasn't it?
Yes, yeah, and I would still consider it our main ally, but we have other allies too.
Yes, but none so powerful as the United States.
Absolutely. And no one that even compares. I mean, the US is still a power apart.
Edward?
Let's remember that in his first term, Donald Trump ripped up the North American Free Trade Agreement because he thought it was awful, negotiated a new one, which he claimed was the best deal ever done, and then renegotiated that, his own deal. He ripped that up and insisted on renegotiating it. This is a guy who has threatened to pull out of NATO unless we engage in the Strait of Hormuz and helping out in the Strait of Hormuz. This is a guy who has woken up in the morning and put 100% tariffs on trading partners. I think any deal done with Donald Trump is not worth the paper it's written on. It will either be used against you or ripped up in a late night or early morning peaking fit. So no, I don't think so, and I think it's why the Liberal Democrats have long advocated that the best route for the UK for growth, for economic security and for military security is with closer ties with our European allies who, whatever anyone's political views are on the EU, are more reliable as trade partners.
Do you think, though, that if the government said tomorrow, right, we realise that we can't deal with America in the way that we have done in the past, and OK, we know that Trump is only there for another 2.5 years, but he could be succeeded by a sort of mini-Trump. So therefore, we've got to recalibrate our economic and our defensive relationships. Do you think the general public in this country are ready to go that far and go as far as you would want to go, particularly vis-a-vis the EU?
Well, I think from a economic and security perspective, what I believe the general public want is they want to feel better off and feel more secure. And right now we live in a cost of living crisis that's seeming to go on forever and an increasingly unstable geopolitical situation globally. So I think if any decision that the UK makes in a long-term fashion should be about making people feel safer and better off. And we believe that the best route for doing that is closer relationship with our EU partners.
Laura?
And I'm sorry, but this is slightly unhinged. We have a centuries-long relationship with America. We have American bases on British soil. We have We're heavily integrated in terms of trade. They are the largest contributor to NATO. However much you dislike Trump, however concerned you are about America, non-engagement is not an option. I think we do have to remember here, I think that Trump has behaved appallingly in recent weeks, but Trump is a man that makes threats. He's been threatening to pull out of NATO since the beginning of his term. He threatened to wipe out Iran a week ago. He negotiates via threats. And therefore, while we need to take him seriously, but we need to accept that he's very, very unlikely to rip up the trade deal. And if he does, we need to renegotiate a new one. It's very, very good that Starmer got that trade deal. It insulated us from tariffs that other countries really, really suffered under. And we have to be realists here in a very increasingly difficult and uncertain world. We have to manage a careful relationship with Trump and with America, aware that they won't always be there for us, but trying to make the best of a difficult situation. And there's no reason why we can't also work closer with the Australians, with Canada, with our European allies, without ignoring the most powerful country in the world, which just isn't an option.
Well, look, I mean, we can negotiate we can discuss the benefits of pandering to Trump. I think if you're looking long term and making long term plans, then what you want is long term reliability. America is never going to be closed to us, and certainly from a supply chain perspective and a defence procurement perspective and a trade perspective, we are very closely integrated with them. But I think that Trump is probably the worst and most extreme version of a more isolationist America that we have seen over a series of presidents. And respectfully, we may have American troops and American bases in the UK, but Trump has also threatened to withdraw, or at least people around him have threatened to withdraw troops and close military bases elsewhere in Europe. So we can't rely on that, and we can't. The problem is that. And I sit on the Foreign Affairs Committee, I sit on the National Security Committee. I regularly meet with ambassadors and foreign ministers and prime ministers from other NATO countries. And I genuinely believe the UK is the last remaining NATO member that is making political security procurement decisions based on the firm belief that America is reliable in an Article 5 situation. Everyone else is beyond that. And what I'm saying is the UK needs to get into that mindset and start making decisions based on what is in our best long-term interests.
Andrew.
Thank you, Ian, and thank you for having me on the show. Look, to Edward, I absolutely think we should have a strong relationship with the European Union. I've been writing about that just this week, and I'd be happy to discuss it further. But the question was about the relationship with Trump, and I think the Prime Minister has got this absolutely right. He has said clearly and consistently that he will not be pressured into changing his position based on what the Truth Social post of the day might happen to be. And I would
even saying that, he wouldn't have said that 6 months ago, would he? The Prime Minister is being not direct in his criticism, but being a little bit more direct than he used to be.
I think so. He's standing his ground, and I think that's what most people see. And he's standing his ground at a very high stakes moment for our country and the world. And what he's also trying to do is strengthen our relationships with countries, like-minded countries in Europe and beyond. And for example, I know he's seeing President Macron on Friday to talk about, what a coalition of countries might be able to do on the Strait of Hormuz in the future. He was seeing Gulf allies over the weekend. So he is, I think, doing a really important job in building alliances, but not cowing to pressure from the White House.
Let's bring another question in here from Sam in Surrey. If we were attacked tomorrow, that's gone off the screen again. If we were attacked tomorrow, would we be protected in any way? Which I guess is looking at the Article 5 situation, because I think a lot of people are coming to the conclusion that Donald Trump would not come to our aid.
I mean, look, NATO is the most important security alliance that we've ever had, and a defensive alliance, and it was a Labour government that took us into NATO, and I'm a strong supporter of it. So, and I will continue to be, but it's an alliance of 32 different nations, Europe, Canada, and...
But if Article 5 is ignored, NATO means nothing.
Well, it's speculation, isn't it? And I think, again, it goes back to there are threats being made, but that haven't been followed through. And the Prime Minister and other leaders of like-minded nations and allies are learning how to adapt in a changed environment, but has reaffirmed his support for NATO. And of course, one of the other things is that our military is intertwined with the United States. That is a reality. It's been a reality for decades and many years over governments of different colours. And as a consequence of that, we're part of Five Eyes, shared intelligence. All of that remains really crucial to our security.
And if you want to come in on the Article 5?
Well, just to follow up on my earlier point, Ian, about talking to other NATO members, well, I always ask exactly this question. In an Article 5 situation, not your country, not my country, but another member is invaded by, let's say, Russia. How confident are you in the US in that situation that they'll respond to an Article 5 being activated? And I always get a caveated answer. It's always, well, it will depend what their defence spending is. It will depend where they are strategically. It will depend on, how important Donald Trump considers them to be. And that's a worrying situation, because I can assure you, if our allies are thinking like that, our enemies are thinking like that. And that's why I get really nervous when Donald Trump says the kind of things he does that undermines global confidence in NATO, and it leaves us all vulnerable.
And of course, the follow-up question to that is, well, if Donald Trump said, no, I wouldn't come to Estonia's aid, well, would Britain or France come to Estonia's aid in those circumstances?
We wouldn't have very much choice, because our troops are already there. And our troops, in the event that the Russians moved against Estonia, British troops would die almost immediately. So we would very much be involved. And I think that it's right that if we want firstly, there is a risk to NATO at the moment, which is that if people don't believe there is collective security, there might not be when you need it. I actually think that it does exist. I think it is much stronger than sometimes the president's statements would suggest. And I think the clear reading of that is that Putin is not going to take NATO on at this stage, and I think he would if he thought the alliance didn't exist anymore. However, we simply cannot take NATO for granted, and far too many countries in the alliance, in the European part of the alliance, have done that, and it's one of the reasons why the Republicans are in this position now, where they see that Americans have invested and spent their tax dollars on a very powerful military, which the Europeans have considered to be their defensive shield. So I find it totally unsurprising that right-wing American politicians have turned around and said, hang on a goddamn minute. Why aren't you putting your hands in your pockets? And and the Germans, to be fair, are now starting to do that. But I was in Paris at the start of the year listening to French politicians, and to be honest, it was utterly delusional, their rhetoric. To listen to them, you would think that Western Europe had growth of 3% over the past 20 years, that defence spending was akin to US defence spending, and that there were real options. And I'm afraid until European NATO takes its head out of the sand and understands that it needs to make really serious investment in its security, NATO will be at medium-term risk.
I think the question we need to ask ourselves, we can talk all we want about what America would do in Article 5 situation, what would we do? Because in the last month, we've learned that we can't even deploy a single warship to a conflict zone. That is how on its knees Britain's defence is. We have extremely historically low defence spending. We were promised by the Labour government a plan for how we were going to increase that defence spending last autumn. It now looks like we won't even get it to the end of this parliament, or the end of this parliamentary term. And then once you look at the defence spending we do have, it's effectively an accounting trick, because huge portions of it are going on things like army pensions, which are very, very important. But to count that as defence spending, it does nothing to defend Britain or look after it.
OK, we'll move on in just a few moments' time. It's 17 minutes past 8.
Call the Cabinet on LBC. Put your questions to the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, tomorrow morning on Nick Ferrari at Breakfast.
Do you ever feel like getting back under your duvet in the middle of the day? Ferroglobin is a great-tasting liquid formula with iron, which contributes to the reduction of tiredness and fatigue and normal formation of haemoglobin. Ferroglobin from Vitabiotics at Boots, pharmacies and vitabiotics.com.
At EDF, we don't just encourage you to use less electricity, we actually reward you for it. That's why, when you use less during peak times on weekdays, we give you free electricity on Sundays. How you use it is up to you. EDF. Change is in our power. Households who reduce their weekday peak electricity usage by 50% can earn up to 16 hours of free electricity per week, subject to fair usage. For all T's and C's, visit edfenergy.com/r-power.
OK, who's all in for Cancer Research UK's Race for Life?
We're doing Pretty Muddy.
It's an obstacle course.
There's one for kids.
Runners.
Walkers.
Book clubbers.
Nick clubbers.
10-pin bowlers.
Choir singers.
Lake swimmers.
Gardeners.
Whether you climb it.
Slide it.
Or crawl it.
go all in against cancer.
All in to help fund life-saving research. Sign up now and save 50% off entry to your local 3K, 5K, 10K or Pretty Muddy event. Search Race for Life. Discount ends April 19th, 2026. T's and C's apply.
If you were missold a home on a holiday park, holidayparkadvicecentre.co.uk could help you receive compensation. Text ADVICE to 78900.
Cross Question with Iain Dale. Watch live on our free Global Player app or the LBC app.
It's 18 minutes past 8. We have Alex Burkhardt from the Conservatives, Andrew Lewin from Labour, Edward Morello from the Lib Dems and Laura Brown from The Spectator. Let's go to a question from Mark in Burgess Hill. Is the USA a bad faith actor negotiating in bad faith? Is it time we sanctioned the USA and Israel for similar reasons we sanctioned Russia? Is it time we lead on applying pressure on the USA? Well, the government does, of course, insist that it does not believe the beginning of the war in Iran was legal. I mean, it would be quite something, Laura, wouldn't it, to sanction the USA?
I think that we are moving away from the world of realistic policy here. You have to, on a global scale, think about leverage. The reason that sanctions on Russia worked quite well is the global community united on it, and we had a clear source of assets that you could target. Regardless of your moral opinion on the war in Iran, I think it is quite nuanced and quite complex. We have nothing to take away from America. We are a very, very small global power compared to them. We are very reliant on them. We're sort of a small dog fighting a dragon, and they could turn around, they could put tariffs on us, they could withhold supply. We could basically bankrupt this country trying to be clever and be sort of moral policemen that we aren't capable of being.
So this is all a bit of virtue signalling from Mark.
I mean, I understand the instinct and the desire for us to be more major players on the world stage, but we ultimately have to live in the world we're in, and that's not a world where we can sanction America economically. We can apply political pressure on them, and that's something.
You talk as if we're some sort of small power. We are the sixth largest economy in the world. We have an economy much bigger than Russia's, for example. I mean, Russia's economy is, I think, smaller than Italy's. So, and yet people see Russia as a big sort of, well, not about a superpower, but almost.
And that's why we were able to apply economic pressure to Russia. But we're a smaller economy than America. And more importantly, I think we're not a very resilient economy. We make very little stuff. We have to constantly import things. Well, we rely on external sources of energy.
That's simply not true. We're still the 9th biggest manufacturing nation in the world.
Well, 9th is actually quite far down. We used to be much higher. We used to have far.
Out of 200 countries, that's not bad.
Well, where's America?
Well, number one, you can't compare a country of 60 million people with a country of 350 million.
That's exactly my point. That's why it's impossible to sanction them.
But I've never understood. I mean, if you look back in history, in the 1970s and early 1980s, I think we were number 6 or 7. So we haven't slipped down that much, given that you've got lots of other countries that are coming up on the rails.
What we failed to do is capitalise on...
Stop talking us down, Laura. That's what I'm saying.
Well, I want to see Britain be great, and I want to see Britain capitalise on advanced manufacturing. I think there's a lot of stuff that we could do to improve resilience. I want to see us have enough a high energy supply domestically via a combination of nuclear, renewables and North Sea oil and gas that would allow us to be resilient to global shocks. But I don't think we're quite there yet.
Agreed.
Iain, can I come in and thank you? Thank you for talking up the economy. But look, seriously, let's go back to
up to a point.
Let's go back to Mark's question if we can, because I would imagine it's come from a place of exasperation about what this conflict in the Middle East means for him and it means for people in this country. And it was very apparent from day one that this was a military intervention by the United States and Israel with no coherent plan or end game. And that's why the Prime Minister was precisely right to reject the pressure that was put on him by the leader of the Conservative Party and the leader of Reform to join this conflict.
That's absolutely.
And we are, and it is the case. I remember all the excited posts on social media in those first 24 hours. And the best way that we can deal with this is de-escalation, because look, we are in a better position relatively than we were a week ago, but we've got to get to a position where there is a full ceasefire, including in Lebanon, because once you have a ceasefire, the economic impact will start to reduce, even though we are looking at months of inflation because of the damage that's already been done.
Edward,
look, I think it's a lovely theoretical idea. The reality is that sanctioning the US, whether alone or in coalition with other countries, would have a minimal effect, and it would certainly mean that we lose what little diplomatic influence we have on the Trump administration. It would be an act of self-harm, and I imagine
a bit like cancelling a state visit.
Well, look, I mean, there are pros and cons to sending the world's greatest diplomat to the US, and there is undoubtedly, I have 100% confidence in His Majesty's ability to charm the president. At the same time, I can't help but feel like we are rewarding the extremely bad behaviour by him at the same time.
Alex?
So I think at the root of what Mark's getting at is desire for kind of more British security and autonomy, and get that sense back that the country has genuine options. Lara's right, that only really is going to come through us having a firmer economic base, real economic growth, and spending more on defence. And at the moment, I'm afraid we're going, as the IMF report this week showed, we're going very much the opposite direction. And the fact that the government has utterly failed in a way that I find completely inexcusable to bring forward the defence investment plan, having promised it about 9 months ago now, being utterly incapable of saying when it's going to come, to the point where Lord Robertson, former Secretary General of NATO, has broken cover and explained that this is advanced cretinism. I think is quite shameful. So
I don't think that was the phrase he used.
I'm paraphrasing. He used it, I think, corrosive. What was it?
Corrosive complacency.
Corrosive complacency. And Fiona Hill, who also wrote reports, comes saying the same thing. General Barron's said the same thing. The Labour defence establishment is utterly incandescent with what is going on.
I mean, Andrew, that is true, isn't it?
Well, what is true is that we're already spending more on defence now in the second year of a Labour government than we did under 14 years of the Conservatives. That's already the case. 5 billion more has already been put in. The defence investment plan is very important, no question about that. Prime Minister's been clear it will come forward as soon as possible.
Why do you think it's been delayed?
But what I will say, and this is important, is that not all defence spending is tied to this single plan. There have been contracts signed for 23 more, with Leonardo for 23 more helicopters, contracts signed for nuclear reactors on our submarines.
That Leonardo deal was done because Leonardo said, if you don't sign by now, we will back out. And other suppliers are going to have to do exactly the same thing, because unless you're committing to spending, these guys are going to close or they're going to move manufacturing elsewhere.
Right, I'm going to close this discussion because we want to move on to a very different subject. Sinead in High Wycombe says, do you think parents of under 16 should take more control of their phones, given that it's the parents who are likely paying for the phones, the contracts and even the electricity to charge them? Well, MPs have this evening rejected a ban on under 16s accessing social media platforms, but the government's consultation on restricting children's social media use is currently underway and runs until the end of May. Right, the three of you, just say how you voted in this debate and why, and then move on to answering Sinead's question.
Any particular order, or?
Yeah, okay. You're pointing out I failed in my duty. Well, Edward can go first.
Yeah, I think so.
This is not fair, because what you need is the two positions, first of all, which is that the Conservative position is an outright ban, and the Labour position, as it stands at the moment, is for no change. What the Liberal Democrats were proposing was an age rating system on social media, which would allow parents to understand the risk and prevent, and would impose effectively the regulatory powers on Ofcom in order to be able to restrict access to social media platforms based on the appropriateness, which is basically the film rating system, right? We already say, if you're a young person, you can't watch an 18 film because we know that the content of that film is bad, corrosive.
Yeah, but you can be stopped at the door of the cinema.
Tory position, right?
In the end, because our amendment wasn't brought forward for a vote in the chamber, this will go back to the Lords, and my view is certainly that Labour are going to be forced into adopting a Lib Dem position on this eventually, even if they have to wait for the end of their review.
Alex?
And I voted for a ban. I have quite strong views on this. I think when we get to the position where we accept that algorithmic platforms are not the right place for young people, where we get to the point where we accept that we should allow children to be children, and those years are very precious and they are best not spent on addictive platforms or behind screens. we will recognise that was something we should have done much faster. I do believe the government is eventually going to come round to this position. It's deeply unfortunate that it's dragged its heels when there have been several opportunities to take the initiative. Kemi Badenoch this week met again with a group of parents who lost their children to people and bad ideas that they came across on social media. When you hear those stories, it is exceptionally moving. We have, for a very long time in this country, accepted that we protect children. We should carry on protecting children in the face of this new technology. I wish we would get on with it.
Laura.
I suspect I'm alone here, or possibly with you, and I think the government will come round to a ban for what it's worth, but I think that would be a terrible mistake. I think we are looking at a lot of policymakers who haven't fully grasped the complexity of the internet, trying to regulate it in a very, very difficult way. I think we should look to Australia. Australia are the first people to pioneer an under-16 social media ban, and we have new research this week that says that 61% of children are still on social media.
And 39% aren't. I would regard that as a win.
Would you?
Yeah. I mean, you're never going to get to a situation where you can ban 100% of kids from using it. So, I mean, OK, you might say 39% isn't that great, but it's 39% that aren't using it that were before.
Well, let's talk about the consequences of them doing it. If you want to ban social media, you have to require every single company that runs any sort of peer-to-peer messaging service, which like tiny cycling enthusiast chat rooms, to Meta for Facebook and Instagram, to demand digital verification of every single person who wants to make an account. That will mean a few things.
Just take their smartphones away. Just take the hardware away, and you can't get on the bloody internet. You can't have access to these addictive algorithms. It's quite straightforward. Ian's totally right. You can't let the best be the enemy of the good. If you start, the Australians are the first people in the world to do it. In the first year that they've done it, they've managed to significantly reduce the number of children using social media. Let's use that as a learning exercise and see how we can get it better. But I think the moment we throw up our hands and say it can't be done, then it's total defeatism.
Why aren't you campaigning for a smartphone ban rather than this weird social media regulation?
What have we been arguing for? We've been arguing that children shouldn't have smartphones in schools. We've been promoting the fact that there is very dangerous content that comes through smartphones. We're not arguing for a phone ban. We're arguing for a massive reduction in smartphones by young people.
So I'm much more sympathetic to that, but the amendment's about social media.
Yes, but it's about how you achieve it, isn't it?
Right, Andrew, you supported your government on this and voted against a ban, but do you think that a ban is inevitable in the end?
Yeah, so look, I supported the government position because essentially this is a couple of sentence amendment tagged onto a bill, the Children's School and Wellbeing Bill, which is about lots of important issues, but not this. And we should start with the facts on that. The government's doing the right thing in having a consultation because we have to get this right. I am very clear that the status quo is failing children and failing parents, and I am very clear that we have to take action. The question is what action? And I hosted a local consultation event in Welwyn Garden City a few weeks ago, and there's real nuance in this debate because Alex and Lara's exchange tells you that. There are some parents who will say, I want the smartphone taken away completely. There was a campaign group who I invited along who would make the case for an outright ban on smartphones for under 14s. Then there's the Australian example. I agree with you, there has been progress made and they were brave to do it, but through the use of VPNs and other hardware, software, then some young people are getting around it. So the consultation and getting this right is more important than a vote today on a 2-sentence amendment.
Right. Time for the news headlines on LBC. It's 8:32. And with those news headlines, we have Daryl Jackson.
A ban on social media for under-16s has been rejected by MPs. The Lords had introduced the measure to a schools bill. A consultation on a ban, among other measures to protect children online, will continue for another month. Police are looking for 2 men suspected of trying to throw petrol bombs at a synagogue in North London. The incident in Finchley in the early hours of this morning is being treated as an attempted hate crime. And 2 men have been handed the first bans for trying to enter a football match without a ticket. They were caught trying to tailgate into last month's EFL Cup final at Wembley. LBC weather, clear spells, but rain in the north and west of the UK, a low of 6 degrees.
This is LBC.
3, 2, 1, 0% APR on an all-electric Mini Cooper. What was that, Luton? Handling is extraordinary, centre of gravity so low, and it could be ours with a 15% deposit and 3-year term. OK, Luton, reroute me to the nearest Mini retailer now.
Land a new all-electric Mini Cooper with 0% APR. Report to your Mini retailer today. Mini UK is a credit broker. Ordered and delivered by 30th of June. PCP finance with Mini Financial Services. Subject to status. 18 plus. T's and C's apply. mini.co.uk/Cooper.
Hi, I'm Sava, founder of Cool U, the daddy of air conditioning. For over 15 years, Cool U have specialised in installing our fully internal aircon systems throughout London, with no mess, no fuss, and no external condenser. And from April the 10th to the 19th, come and meet me and the team at the Ideal Home Show, London Olympia. Cool U for a cool, comfortable home.
You've arrived. Your dream holiday. You got there for less thanks to comparing flight prices on Kayak. An idyllic local restaurant nestled in the cliffs. A peaceful pool with your own private sunbed. This is the life. All you have to do is actually book it. Don't holidays. Use Kayak to compare flight prices from hundreds of travel sites and bag a great deal. Search Kayak and go see for yourself.
Cross Question with Iain Dale on LBC. Text 84850.
8:34 on LBC. Let me reintroduce the panel. Laura Brown is commissioning editor for The Spectator. Edward Morello is Liberal Democrat MP for West Dorset. Andrew Lewin is Labour MP for Welland and Hatfield. And Alex Burkhardt, Conservative frontbencher and MP for Brentwood and Ongar in God's Own County of Essex. Ollie in Nottinghamshire says, would it be at all fair for the parents of the Southport killer to face being deported from this country, as Robert Jenrick is suggesting? Well, the Reform UK's Treasury spokesperson told LBC this morning that the parents of the Southport killer should face being deported from the UK after the public inquiry's first report into the attack claimed they should have reported obvious concerns about their son to authorities before he carried out the atrocity. Laura, let's start with you.
I must admit, I'm not really sure what Rob Jenrick is on here. The first key point is that we don't know the legal status of Alex Radabikana's parents. They may be British citizens. In fact, based on the amount of time they've been in the UK, it's very likely they are. And if they haven't got dual citizenship, they can't be deported. So I have no idea where he's got that from. It's very likely that they don't. It is illegal to make someone stateless. But then secondly, I think that Rob Jenrick should read the report, because there's been a lot of anger about Axel Radabikana's parents, and I understand that. I think they are guilty of an enormous failing in failing to report the things that they saw. The report recommends we introduce criminal liability for ignoring very, very high risk of criminality and concerning behaviour. I agree with that recommendation. But we also have to grapple with the far more devastating and uncomfortable fact that the state failed here repeatedly. We've got Language to Children's Social Services, ignoring warning signs. We've got Prevent, ignoring warning signs. His school, being aware he had violent tendencies, ignoring warning signs. CAMS being aware that he had violent tendencies, ignoring warning signs. And I question if a report from his parents would have kicked those state authorities into action. And what we need to do now is work out how the state can so devastatingly have failed those little girls with such terrible consequences.
Do I remember right that he was found to have taken a machete into school on 8 occasions? Now you think, well, if that doesn't sort of make people alarmed or sort of set off alarms, what would?
And he'd violently threatened classmates. The school were clearly aware that he was a very high-risk individual because they were very keen for him to do school from home and not come in. And to know someone is that severe a risk and not refer them is a problem. For Prevent to see this pattern of behaviour and not take further action is a huge failing on behalf of the Home Office. And we need to continue the work to understand how that happened, because the state is in many ways not joined up at the moment. Departments don't talk to each other. Local services don't function properly. And these sorts of terrible things are what can happen when we allow that to continue.
Andrew.
I think that Lara's spoken powerfully there. That's the most appalling, evil and heinous crime. But I agree with her that there is no basis for Robert Jenrick's position. The police have been clear there are going to be no charges brought against the parents. And I think what is really sad, I'm afraid, and has become typical of Robert Jenrick and Reform, is that they are apparently seeking opportunities to divide. And the contrast with the MP for Southport, Patrick Hurley, who had a PMQ today and has done enormous amount of work in his community supporting the victims, but the wider community as best he can. He said today in the Commons that, of course, he will continue to support the victims in any way that he possibly can, but he doesn't want his town to be defined by this crime. And I think it's the voices of people like Patrick Hurley that I want to listen to on this, not Robert Jenrick.
Alex?
So I haven't read the report. Sounds like Lara has. I've just read news reports about it. But this was really one of the most terrible acts that I can remember, and it really sent a chill through the country. And if it was the case, and Lara may be able to confirm this, that his parents deliberately did not disclose the fact that they thought he was going to perpetrate an act like this, that is incredibly serious. And I would, at the very least, want to know why on earth charges are not being pressed in those circumstances. And off the back of those charges, then, depending on their status and the findings of any criminal inquiry, then other things might happen. But I don't, as a member of the public, I don't understand how it could be the case that somebody might know that this was going to happen, do nothing, and face no consequences for that.
What about Robert Jenrick's point, though, that, well, they should be deported if they have been guilty of this?
Well, Robert is fond of publicity, and I don't intend to give him any, unlike your show, which has decided to mention it.
I plead guilty. Edward?
I think what happened was atrocious, and as the report clearly says, there were multiple institutional failings. But it is also clear in the report that there were failings by the killer's parents. They will have to live with the consequences of the decisions they made, as unfortunately will the friends and families of the victims of the killer. Fundamentally, I believe that you don't punish the child for the sins of the father, and you don't punish the father for the sins of the child. But absolutely, their decisions.
But this report is suggesting that you should, isn't it? Isn't that what you're saying, Laura?
The police have said that they don't intend to charge based on the information.
What the report says is there's a gap in the law currently, so parents don't have a legal responsibility to report. So obviously, legally, his parents can't be charged, but that doesn't mean the law shouldn't be changed in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I think it's absolutely right that we ensure that anyone who is complicit through their behaviour, as we've done with the Hillsborough law, as we've looked at corporate manslaughter over the years, absolutely we need to make sure that anyone who is complicit willingly in allowing crime to go ahead is brought to justice. But regardless of the current legislative situation, this couple will have to live with the consequences of their decision not to act harder and faster to prevent this from happening.
Ben has texted in to say Axel Rudabakana's head teacher did report him to the authorities, but was told they were racial stereotyping because he was a black boy with a knife. That's what Ben's saying. I haven't read the report, but that's a terrible thing, isn't it, if that is true?
Absolutely.
Right, let's move on to a different subject. Russell in Connors Quay says, is the removal of Orban in Hungary a fatal blow to the anti-EU movement, and will the UK inevitably end up back in the EU? Andrew?
Well, first of all, it's the curse of J.D. Vance, I think, and he's very welcome to come and campaign for my rivals with his track record. But look, there is a very serious point here. This was a victory for the forces of democracy in Europe, and I am very, very pleased with the result. What happens in Hungary is distinct to what's happening in this country, but I am a proud pro-European. I'm very pleased that the government has reset its relationship with the EU. We've got confirmation of another summit coming up this summer, and I think it's really important that we build on the successes that we've already had. We need to get the youth mobility deal over the line. It's about a year ago today that I called on the government to be bold in pursuing a youth mobility agreement. It's a policy that's got widespread public support. I want to see that come forward and to build from there in our relationship.
So does it have public support. I've seen nothing to indicate that freedom of movement for young people working in the UK has public support.
I would recommend you have a look at some of the polling that's out there, Best for Britain. If you're looking about attitudes on a youth mobility deal for people aged 18 to 30 from the UK going to the EU and vice versa, there is overwhelming and consistent public support that's around 65 to 70% because the British people recognise that our EU allies are important. They want to see young people have opportunities that have been taken away for those in the UK since Brexit, and that it's a good thing.
As part of that mobility deal, do you think people in their 20s should be able to bring their families? Do you think those family members should be able to claim benefits and use the health service even if they're not working? How deep would you like that to go? And are you aware of what the public thinks if those freedoms, as you would term them, are extended to people who are not UK citizens?
Okay, so I think it's important not to confuse what the government is negotiating right now.
We don't know what the government's know what the government's negotiating because it won't tell us. We've repeatedly asked questions in the House of Commons about what is being asked for, and the government will not answer those questions. So if you have insight, you can make the announcement now.
I have plenty of insight.
Come on,
Alex,
great. Let's tell us.
It's in the public domain because after last year's summit, they set out the terms of negotiation which are happening right now, and the position of the government is that this is a visa-based scheme. So on your question, everybody who comes as part of a youth mobility deal will be on a visa.
Will they be able to bring their families?
Well, each individual applicant will have to apply for a visa.
So the answer is potentially yes.
If you let me finish, the negotiation that is happening right now, and I'm not privy to all of the details, but it's around numbers and what's a reasonable number of people that would come in as part of a youth mobility deal. Well, that is still subject to conversation. What I would say is that there is strong public support for this, that net migration numbers have come down very sharply already. They're at 200,000.
There's still a lot of people coming into the country. There are a lot of people leaving the country because of the economic situation that your party has put the country in.
And what we're talking about is young Europeans who contribute to the economy.
Okay.
Well, they may not. They may come here and claim benefit.
Hang on. The question actually isn't on the youth mobility. I mean, Andrew, just before I move on to others, in your heart, you would like Britain to go back into the EU, wouldn't you?
I have said that in my lifetime I'd like that, but the serious thing as a parliamentarian is you have to deal with the reality as it is now. And the reality is now that we've got a lot of work to do to rebuild our bridges with the European Union. This summit this summer is really important on youth mobility, on the SPS deal, on closer alignment on energy, lots of practical things that people support, and we can build from there.
Edward.
Which bit of the question do you want me to answer? Is it
Hungary or EU? The main question. And will the UK inevitably end up in the EU?
Gosh, I don't know. I don't know. All of my political predictions are invariably incorrect. So do whatever the opposite is.
But would you like to?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Look, my party is proudly pro-EU, proud European, proud internationalist. We are devastated by Brexit, and yeah, absolutely, we want to be as close to the EU as possible, and ultimately, absolutely back in it because we believe that the future of the UK is as part of the EU. So look, we're pushing the government to go as far as possible. We're pushing the government to put as much on the table as possible. If they're really keen on unlocking growth, then a customs type union, a bespoke arrangement with the EU is key to doing that. But the closer we are to Europe, the better it is for the UK economy.
Laura.
I think the Hungarian election has been slightly misinterpreted by a lot of British journalists. I think it was fought on two key issues, corruption and the economy. And I think it's worth noting that Orban's opponent is significantly to the right of the Tory party, for example. This isn't, a victory of left over a right-wing government. And I wouldn't say there's any evidence that he's very pro-EU.
Absolutely.
So I'm quite unsure. I know that the EU has celebrated this victory because they're glad to see Orban gone. But I think they're going to find themselves having a similarly difficult relationship with his successor.
Which in itself, when I heard Ursula von der Leyen sort of trumpeting this as a great bit, I'm thinking, is that really what you should be doing? You've effectively done J.D. Vance's work for him when he was complaining about the EU interfering in a Hungarian election while he personally was interfering in a Hungarian election. I did think that was a bit odd.
Look, the EU Commission has always found democracy incredibly inconvenient. It's not. The EU is not a democratic project. It never has been. And I think what Laura says is quite right about what's happened in Hungary. A very right-wing man who stood on an anti-corruption platform has replaced Viktor Orban, and he is not going to suddenly think that von der Leyen is, the best thing since sort of sliced Gruyere.
He is better on Ukraine. I mean, that might be the one area where we get
I totally agree with that, and I sincerely hope he doesn't turn out to be as close to Putin as Orban was at times. And I'm not saying that his election is a bad or a good thing. I'm just saying it isn't a massive victory for the pro-EU movement.
The weirdest thing about it was that Orban just, even before the final results, was like, yep, I lost. Yeah. Sorry, I'm off.
Wasn't expecting that.
Yeah.
Shall we have a comment from the LBC YouTube channel? I always brace myself. This is from someone called Empty Player. Considering reform's current popularity, we won't rejoin the EU for at least another 15 years. Well, their popularity seems to be going down a little bit in the opinion polls at the moment.
I think we're often in these discussions about the EU, and I often think we forget to factor in the EU to them. They were pretty clear when we left that we weren't going to be allowed back in, and they were very clear that if we wanted to come back in, we'd have to accept the euro. And no economist right now is saying we should tie ourselves to the euro. It's a pretty unstable currency. It would be a huge cost to us. So we're going to have to work out our way of working with the EU without rejoining.
Right. We've got a fun question to look forward to. I'm about to tell the panel what it is so they can prepare their hilarious answers. It's 8:49.
This is LBC.
You've probably been with the same energy supplier for decades. And why wouldn't you be? Loyalty matters. But lately, bigger hasn't always felt better. You've probably dealt with long waits and endless automated menus in search of someone who can actually help. Octopus Energy is now Britain's biggest energy supplier, trusted by over 8 million customers, because we do things differently. Our people focus on the most important thing, you. When you call, you'll speak to a real person. No robotic scripts, no computer says no, just an honest conversation with someone who actually wants to help. Join the millions who've already made the move. Octopus Energy, recommended by Which a record 9 years running. Visit octopus.energy/better for verification.
You know what you're getting with a wedding? Wedding hats. A baby in a waistcoat crying throughout the vows. Themed tables. Awkward best man speech. The +1.
Hello.
People dancing in a circle. Ruined rental suit. Sometimes in life you just know what you're getting. Like a luxury bed and a great night's sleep. You know what you're getting with Premier Inn.
Imagine your dream holiday made possible by comparing cheap flights on Kayak. Walking on an unspoilt goes on for miles beach on the Sardinian coast, plunging into the splendour of an idyllic lagoon in Greece. Ah, yes, this is the life. All you have to do is actually book it. Don't holidays. Use Kayak to compare prices from hundreds of travel sites and airlines to find your dream deal. Search Kayak and go see for yourself.
When you're smiling.
Banning Dental Group clinics with over 5,000 top-rated Google reviews. Keep on smiling.
Cross Question with Iain Dale on LBC.
8:51, we have Alex Burkhardt, Andrew Lewin, Edward Morello and Laura Brown with us answering your questions. Here's one from Raz in Warwick. Should Keir Starmer pay for the refurbishments he has made to Downing Street, given public funds are in such dire straits? The Cabinet Office has spent £29,761 on furnishing and refurbishing the Prime Minister's flat, which is in number 11 Downing Street. The purchase includes almost 4,000 and 5,000 for 3 sofas and 9,000 for internal painting. 3 sofas, I mean, you can't get a good sofa nowadays for much less than that, can you? Edward?
No. I mean, every Prime Minister who moves into number 10 or number 11, depending on where they're resident, refurbishes it according to their own taste. I mean, if we want to save taxpayers' money, let's not keep changing Prime Ministers every couple of years as we've been doing for the last.
Are you going to join the Labour Party then?
No, but I'm all in favour of the current one seeing out his term. But yeah, look, I mean, ultimately, yeah, this story comes up all of the time, and I don't have a lot of time for it.
Alex.
Of course, the Prime Minister shouldn't have to pay, but what should happen is that the government should be entirely open about how it's spending taxpayers' money.
Well, they are.
No. Well, do you know how these figures came out? These figures came out because of an FOI request after repeated parliamentary questions by MPs, and the government tried to hide. Now, when you see that paint jobs cost you £9,000, it suggests that whoever is signing that off isn't paying attention to pounds, shillings and pence, and it suggests that they're making bigger mistakes somewhere else. So this is why I agree. The Prime Minister shouldn't have to pay for it. But you should have transparency, because transparency is what ultimately drives good commissioning behaviour in government.
Andrew?
No, it's a complete non-story.
Was it a non-story when Boris Johnson's wallpaper cost £58,000?
Well, it's as Edward said, every Prime Minister has the right to redecorate. What was a story was Boris Johnson partying number 10 during the pandemic. That was a story, but it was a story. This is not a story, in my view.
I think we can be really nasty to politicians sometimes, and stories like that are nasty. I'm not sure why MPs were using parliamentary time to try and find out how much does decorating cost. That seems like a waste of time. This is a very small amount of money. We're talking about billions earlier for defence spending. We also have to bear in mind that Keir Starmer can't just call up a decorator and say, could you come over and paint my house? They'll have to have been vetted. There'll have been security arrangements. It's a lot more complicated to refurbish Downing Street. What Labour, I imagine what Labour are finding out now is that they somewhat regret attacking Tory Prime Ministers for doing the same thing, because, once you're getting into Downing Street and you want to have important meetings there and do decent entertainment of businessmen and foreign powers, you need a up-to-date house, and it's a very small house compared to what some leaders get.
It really is. Right, thank you, Vas, for that. A text question from Nicole. Is the MP calling for a summer of sex devaluing Parliament or raising worthwhile issues? Well, Labour MP Samantha Niblett, insert your own joke here, is campaigning for more open, inclusive and lifelong sex education under the title Yes, Sex Please, We're British, and even wants to take sex toys into Parliament in order to promote discussions about sexual pleasure. Who would like to take this one first?
I think it's a Labour question, isn't it?
Is it? Go on,
I was so nice to you in the green room in the way. It's not a reception that I'll be attending personally.
Are you not looking forward to the pin badges we're all going to have to wear at PMQ?
No. I haven't looked in detail at Samantha's campaign. All I would say, on the serious note, there is a serious issue about young people being exposed to pornography, and other things on the internet. We talked about social media today, so that is a debate in society that we absolutely need to have. But if that event were to happen in Parliament, I will most likely give it a miss.
I'm so sorry. Just on this, I agree with you. I'm really concerned about pornography. It's why I think the social media ban isn't really going to be effective, because pornography exposure is the big problem. But I've looked at Samantha's campaign, and she appears to have partnered with a pornography distributor and with a sex toy company. So if the Labour Party is concerned about the exposure of porn to young people, is an MP talking about how much she enjoys watching porn and trying to have a parliamentary reception about that very helpful?
She actually said that.
She's spoken about
Corey,
ethical porn
go on
consumption.
cross question. Did you just give me the finger? Alex?
The temptation to make inappropriate jokes is too strong. I just, one could say that it was inevitable that Labour would sort of screw the country over the summer. But I think I don't think, as Lara said, it's very wise to have a member of Parliament, partnering with a pornography company and a sex toy company. But look, MPs are elected to be independent, and if that's what she wishes to do with her parliamentary time, it is up to her.
Edward?
Yeah, look, I'm a Liberal. I think it's
anything goes.
Yeah, I think it's a great.
So you will wear the pin badge.
I'll wear the hat. No, look. I think when you read into the details of the campaign, I understand why it's being promoted in the way that it is in order to catch media attention. But it's also about having lifetime sex education. So talking about perimenopause, talking about menopause, talking about all of those various different stages. It's talking about the difference between real world sex and what is portrayed on pornography sites, and how dangerous and corrosive that is, and how we shouldn't be pushing young people in that direction. They're getting completely misunderstood. this complete misunderstanding of what real life is like, or for creating false expectations. I think there's a lot of really good things in what she's trying to achieve with this campaign. And, ultimately, I do think that we should have a more open, sensible, grown-up conversation about sex. But we're British, so we like to sort of titter about it instead.
Well done. I see what you did there. You did it so I don't have to. Right, fun question from Lynn. A life jacket used by a survivor of the sinking of the Titanic is going up for auction and is expected to reach some £350,000. If you could own an item related to one historical event, which event would it be, or which item would it be, and why? Laura.
It might be a push to get this in my small house share, but I quite like a frieze from the Elgin marbles. I think they have the most incredible history. They've got thousands of years of history in Greece. The Parthenon is used for several different things. They portray fascinating stories, and they've also had a really powerful impact on British poetry. One of my favourite poems in the world is the poem Keats first penned when he saw them. They've survived a shipwreck. They've in the British Museum now. Obviously, it'd be a shame if I had one and people couldn't go and see it, but I'd love to pop that, on my wall.
Okay, good answer. Edward?
I don't think it constitutes a historical object just yet, but I think, in years to come, we will look back at this as the sort of one of the seminal moments, items of this year. I want the Fabergé egg that was stolen from the handbag in the pub in Soho. I think that is just absolutely brilliant. I might even already have it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, clever.
This is my cover story.
Yeah.
Andrew?
Recent history, Headingley 2019. Ben Stokes, the greatest Ashes innings, I think,
you made
of
a
all
friend.
time.
Chris is nodding his head.
Excellent. 167 not out, I think it was, to win the game. His bat from that innings.
Alex.
The Crown of Athelstan. In 927, Athelstan became the first king of England. It's the 1100th anniversary of that incredibly important year, next year. And I'm part of a cross-party campaign working with Tom Holland and Michael Wood, the historians, to make sure the country remembers it.
Marvellous. Well, I would pick Bobby Moore's shirt from the 1966 World Cup final, which will surprise no one listening. Thank you all very much. Really good edition of Cross Question tonight. On tomorrow's panel, we'll be focusing on some of the hugely significant international issues which are shaping our politics here in the UK. And I'll be joined by the former advisor to David Lammy while he was Foreign Secretary, Ben Judah, former Conservative International Development and also Middle East Minister Alistair Burt, international security expert Elizabeth Braw, plus the recently resigned diplomat Amir Kotecha will be back on the show. Well, coming up in the next hour, we are going to return to the subject of the social media ban for 16-year-olds. MPs rejected an amendment from Lord Nash tonight, which would have introduced it relatively quickly, but I think it is going to be introduced in the Queen's speech. There will be a commitment to do something, but we know not what yet, because the consultation doesn't end until the end of May. But I wonder whether you think that this might be the law of unintended consequences. If we do ban social media for under 16s, could it do more harm than good? 0345 6060 973 is the number to call here on LBC.
On your radio, on the LBC app, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 9 o'clock, 2 people have been arrested after an attempted arson attack at a synagogue in North London. A brick and 2 bottles thought to contain petrol were thrown at the building in Finchley overnight, but they didn't ignite. LBC's Helen Hodinott has the latest.
Police arrested a 47-year-old woman and a 46-year-old man, both in the Watford area, on suspicion of arson endangering life. Police say CCTV from the synagogue in Finchley shows 2 suspects wearing balaclavas and dressed in dark clothing managed to gain entry to the synagogue's grounds just after midnight last night.
MPs have voted down a social media ban for under-16s for a second time. The Lords had introduced the measure to a schools bill, but an education minister told the Commons that the government's consultation allows them to consider a wider range of services and features. Labour MP Andrew Lewin told LBC they have to get the legislation right.
There are some parents who will say, I want the smartphone taken away completely. Then there's the Australian example, and they were brave to do it, but through the use of VPNs and other hard web software, then some young people are getting around it. So the consultation and getting this right is more important than a vote today on a 2-sentence amendment.
The Ministry of Justice has announced it freed 179 prisoners in error in England and Wales between last April and this March. Mistaken releases have come under the spotlight since an asylum seeker and a convicted sex offender was allowed to walk free in October. The Health Secretary's promised faster access to help for conditions such as endometriosis under plans to improve women's health care in England. Wet Streeting says women have been made to feel their voices do not matter. Midwife Leah Hazard says it is a great start.
It's hopefully going to be putting some power back into women's hands in the community with online and local resources and allowing them to feed back more effectively. But what we really need is a sustained long-term commitment to ring-fencing those resources.
And the AA is insisting it had no intention of hiding fees from learner drivers. More than 80,000 of them will be refunded after 2 of its driving schools were found not to be disclosing the full price up front. In the city, the FTSE 100 has closed down 49 points at 10,559. The pound buys $1.35 and €1.15. LBC weather, clear spells but rain in the north and west of the UK tonight, a low of 6 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Daryl Jackson.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Iain Dale.
Very good evening, 4 minutes past 9 on LBC. We all know that it's a great temptation for all politicians to jerk their knees and say something must be done. And often, when something is done, it turns out to be the wrong thing because it's done in haste. You know what they say? Sort of act in haste, repent at leisure. Now, the Australian government have introduced a new law banning social media for the under-16s. Now, it hasn't even been enforced for a year yet, so I think it's probably a little bit too early to judge whether it's worked or not. But we had the discussion in Cross Question. I was talking to Natasha Clark about it earlier. And I was saying that I thought that, well, if 39% of teenagers in Australia now have been prevented from using social media, well, that's better than the situation was before. But you can't have perfection in law. There will always be people who can find a way around the law, whether it's a financial law, whether it's a criminal law, or whether it's an internet law. We know that young people are incredibly resourceful at getting around things on the internet, and they can do it in a way that their parents will never be able to discover. And although I think that in many ways parents are do have responsibility for what their children are able to see on the internet, I have real sympathy with parents who aren't particularly internet savvy, don't particularly know how mobile phones or smartphones work, don't understand what a VPN is and all the rest of it. I completely relate to that. But in the end, we know that excessive use of social media, becoming addicted to social media, frankly, whether you're a child or not, is unhealthy. I think I'm addicted to social media in a way that's probably a little bit unhealthy. I can find myself scrolling through Instagram reels for literally before I realise an hour's gone by. And it's very entertaining, but it is addictive. You think, oh, just watch one more. Oh, just one more. I mean, it is like a drug. And we know that for young people, whatever age you are, just remember when you were at school. And children, I think, are far more cruel to each other than any adult is. In terms of bullying, I'm talking about here. And so I would like to see a system where internet bullying can be sort of eliminated as far as possible. It'll never be totally eliminated. But I think there is too much of that goes on among young people. And we've seen the tragic results of that, where many kids have taken their own lives because they cannot stand the bullying any longer. So if a ban can get rid of that, well, who's going to say that that isn't a good thing? But could this be the law of unintended consequences? Do you think that effectively, if we do this, that if there is a ban on social media, it could do more harm than good? Very interested to hear your views on this, because I don't think there's a right and wrong answer. This is not one of those binary things where you say, well, yes, that is definitely right and that is definitely wrong. We know that a lot of other countries are adopting a form of social media ban. I think Greece is doing it. I think they're doing it for under 14. So there's going to be all sorts of different permutations of different laws. And it may be, you could argue, well, let's actually wait a year or two before we make a final decision, and let's look at what happens in other countries and let's get it right. But then you think, yeah, what about those teenagers who take their own lives in the intervening 2 years before the law is introduced? I mean, it's quite difficult to say to their parents, yeah, well, we wanted to wait to see what other countries were doing, isn't it? Now, I think this will be in the Queen's speech. There'll be some commitment to introducing some form of social media ban. The King, did I say Queen's speech just then? Yeah, I did. The King's speech is May the 13th. So that will be the acid test. Now, the consultation runs until the end of May. So I don't think we're going to get a big, quick decision on the government from this, but I think there will be some form of commitment. Natasha Clark is our political editor and joins me now. Natasha, do you agree with me that it will be in the King's speech?
I don't think it'll be in the Queen's speech,
No,
Ian.
no.
I think it'll be in the King's one.
Yes. It's late. I've had a difficult day.
Oh, bless you. Yes, I think you're totally right. The government are definitely going to act on this. It's just a question of how they do it. And I think, the points that you raised just there, that many critics are pointing to over social media bans are totally valid. And obviously government, as we were speaking about earlier today, wants to introduce legislation that actually works. And they are obviously looking to Australia and looking to other places around the world to make sure that they are bringing forward laws which have as many loopholes that are closed as possible. And you refer to that research which was done in Australia, and obviously they've had the ban in place for a few months now, but it's the first of its kind study showing that tech companies are basically failing to close down underage accounts. And you might expect that that's probably normal at this point, right? Because they've only just introduced it. And of course, if social media is indeed as addictive as some critics are saying it is, then of course it's going to be difficult to wrench kids off social media. And obviously many people are saying, well, actually, you need to be thinking about the next generation and stopping them from being addicted in the first place. But that study that we referred to earlier today shows that 3 in 5 Australian 12 to 15-year-olds who had accounts on restricted platforms before the ban came into force still have access to at least one or more accounts. And the major platforms have retained a majority of their child users so far. 53% of previous TikTok users, 53% of YouTube users, and 52% of Instagram users still able to access their accounts. This was polling done by the Molly Rose Foundation and Youth Insight, which is Australia's largest online youth panel. So it's definitely not straightforward. And of course, we've had this ban, the vote on the ban in the House of Commons today. It was an amendment that was put forward by Lord Nash, the former Minister for Schools. He was speaking earlier to LBC's Nick Ferrari and gave his assessment of how the government is handling this issue.
They are very much behind the eight ball in terms of their thinking on this. They weren't really engaged with this until we brought it to their attention. And they may be a little frightened of the companies, but the government acted really quite decisively on pornography. They acted decisively on nudification apps. And all I'm saying to them is, particularly now, following these game-changing US cases where some pretty shocking material was disclosed by the social media companies, and they were found to have acted with malice, oppression, fraud, and to be negligent, and to have deliberately designed addictive apps. These are game changers, and the Prime Minister has said that, and that he will now act to legislate against these harmful aspects of social media.
And Ian, we've just got some news in from Lord Nash, the former Minister for Schools. He's just reacted to us in reaction to the vote being voted down in the House of Commons. He says it's deeply disappointing the government and MPs have chosen again to sit on the fence at a moment when globally the tide has turned, as we've seen from historic recent cases in the US and the daily growing list of countries taking decisive action. Now is the time. We've also heard from the Conservatives, and they actually were voting against this today in the Commons as well. Voting for this amendment, so voting obviously opposed to the Labour government. Laura Trott, the Shadow Education Secretary, have said Labour MPs have once again failed parents and children by voting against this ban. Other countries are waking up to the harms, but under Keir Starmer, the UK is falling behind. And I've just been looking at the House of Commons website to see if any Labour MPs, as you predicted, may decide to vote against the government. And we have had 3 tonight who have decided to vote with the Tories today. That's Richard Bergen, Imran Hussain and John McDonnell, the former Shadow Chancellor. So breaking with the Labour instruction to go against this amendment tonight. Now, I'm not sure what level of whip these MPs were on, so I'm not sure whether they will face any punishment, and certainly not as the MPs, as the Labour Party and the government are, of course, considering this consultation. It's probably quite unlikely that they will face any punishment. But as we were saying earlier, Ian, we know that there is a level of support amongst Labour MPs to do something, and Keir Starmer is expected to speak on this, we understand, at some point in the next few days.
Natasha, thank you very much indeed. That's Natasha Clark, LBC's political editor. Dr. Tony Sampson joins me. He's a reader in digital communications at the University of Essex's Business School and the author of the upcoming book, The Struggle for User Experience. Tony, thank you for talking to us. Now, you're very sceptical about a ban. Why?
Well, let's say I'm not sceptical about making social media a better place to be, but I do think a ban is a blunt instrument. I think just listening to the last comment there about the New Mexico case being a kind of rationale for a ban, I think on the contrary, I think that what the outcome of the New Mexico case suggests is that there are other ways in which we can tackle new media companies. I mean, the New Mexico ruling was really good news because it happened in the US, not far away from Silicon Valley, where a lot of these companies are operating. So my work is very critical of the social media business model, but I think there are too many risks going down the road of a ban.
Because you think it wouldn't be technically possible, or what?
Well, I think there's a number of reasons. I think technically, you mentioned VPN, you mentioned that young kids know a hell of a lot about technology that their adults don't, that their parents don't. I think also just the history of banning things, or the history of prohibition, is once you drive something underground, particularly for that age group, it will become potentially more rebellious. It will also encourage kids to hide social media use even more from parents. So I think there's a whole series of risks associated with that. And there are more kind of smart ways forward, particularly learning from the New Mexico case, where it has been exposed that these algorithms are designed for, as you mentioned, for addiction. The reason why that is because they want to keep people on and engaged online for as much time as they can, because that's how they make their money. Attention is monetized in that way. So I think regulation needs to treat these companies not just as tech companies, but as media companies.
But how different is that in reality to what we already have, where if you're watching Coronation Street of an evening and there's a cliffhanger, that makes it addictive. So you then watch the next episode. It's the same with sort of Instagram Reels. I mean, obviously there are harmful sides to it, but there are other things in our lives which are addictive, and we don't seem to want to ban them.
I agree with you on that. I would say that with social media, it's a lot more intensified. Algorithms are the complete infrastructure of these systems, whereas a cliffhanger in a soap opera is something that's designed into a piece of entertainment. So recommendation system, something like Netflix, changes the game. It's not just now cliffhangers. It's continuous watching, as you mentioned, doom scrolling. So I think the design of the algorithms, the infrastructures themselves are a lot more intense than the experience of watching television. But in a way, I kind of agree with what you're saying there. We probably grew up watching too much television, and our attention was pulled in all different directions with that. And there's a similar media panic going on here with the idea that all kids being negatively impacted by social media. And I think it ignores Ofcom research itself, which actually shows that the people are most anxious about social media use are the parents. And kids of under 16 are actually reporting things like, how creative it can be, and a lot of positive things you can get from using social media.
Let me read out a text from Mo, see what you think of this. He says, Iain talks like a non-technical parent, head in the sand. What he should be asking is why can we get people into space but we cannot stop children bypassing parental controls? I mean, that's an interesting point, isn't it?
It is. So I've got two ways to approach this. One would be regulations. You don't treat a company like Meta as a big tech company. You treat it as a media company. You wouldn't get away with this sort of content on radio or television. So they need to be treated as companies need to take editorial responsibility for content. But the other main thing is education. Yeah, and this isn't just educating kids. This is educating adults. To not only understand the kind of technical workarounds, but also to understand, exactly the kind of traps, the emotional traps that social media set for everyone. I mean, you started off by saying you felt you were addicted.
Yeah.
Maybe if you went to a few classes on the psychology of design and algorithms, you might learn a little bit.
I'm too busy. I've got a subsequent engagement on that one. But, I mean, do you not... I don't know if you were listening earlier, and I said, look, this study that's been done in Australia where they're saying, well, 39% of kids have been obeying this ban, but 61 haven't. And I'm thinking, well, that's still 39% that aren't exposed to all of the downsides of social media that would have been before. You're never going to get 100% perfection, are you? And if we devised a system that was 80 to 90% positive and meant that 80 to 90% of teenagers wouldn't be able to access these things, I would have thought that was a pretty good result.
I just wonder how that figure relates to, say, kids who, if they were told not banned, but were told to reduce their use, were looked after by parents who were consciously stopping them using it, particularly at night, whether those figures would correspond with that.
Well, I've no idea, but I suppose the other option would be just to ban under 16s from owning smartphones. I mean, that would presumably have more chance of success. And sort of, I mean, I'm all in favour of kids having phones, but they'd have to be the sort of old Nokia brick phones where you couldn't access all of these different apps.
Yeah, it's one solution, isn't it? I think they'd find a way to access social media in some way. And banning anybody from owning a phone whether you're under 16 or not, I'm not too sure whether that would work.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. That's Tony Sampson from the University of Essex's Business School. His book, well, when's your book coming out, Tony?
Later this year. That's University of Minnesota Press.
Right. The Struggle for User Experience is the title. Right. We'll come to your calls in a moment on this. I mean, I'm sort of split on it in that I think if I was an MP and had to vote on it, I probably would vote for a ban. But the libertarian side of me doesn't like banning things. And I would like to think that we could use education, that we could use technology to effectively achieve the same aim. But look, I'm not going to pretend I understand the technology here. 0345 6060 973. Do you think this could be the law of unintended consequences? You're listening to LBC. I'm Iain Dale. It's 9:20.
Weekdays from 7 a.m.
Why don't you get the Prime Minister on the phone and say, come on, Sakir, we've actually got to show some action here.
Straight to the point.
It's the most puerile rationale you could imagine.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC.
This is not a one-off incident.
Listen on our free Global Player app or the LBC app. Download it now from your app store. LBC.
Do you ever feel like getting back under your duvet in the middle of the day? Ferroglobin is a great-tasting liquid formula with iron, which contributes to the reduction of tiredness and fatigue and normal formation of hemoglobin. Ferroglobin from Vitabiotics at Boots, pharmacies and vitabiotics.com.
At Ocado, you'll save 25% on your first shop and get free delivery, which means if you were to buy a 4-cheese pizza, you'd basically be getting one of the cheeses for free. Save and splurge at Ocado, the online supermarket.
Geographical and other restrictions. Min spend £60 and charges apply. Discount available on food. New customers only. Max saving £20. Terms at ocado.com.
You know what you're getting with a conference. Laptop backpacks, security pass lanyard.
If you could just pop this on.
Being asked, how was your journey in?
How was your journey in?
An array of triangular sandwiches. Having to deal with a small crisis back at the office. Sometimes in life you just know what you're getting, like a great night's sleep and a tasty breakfast. You know what you're getting with Premier Inn.
Your time is valuable. Your perspective should be too. The Economist cuts through the noise with the stories that truly shape your world.
How can you believe that a new regime won't crush you just like the previous one?
Online scams are stranger than they've ever been.
When the world's turned upside down, know which way is up. Read, watch, or listen to The Economist.
Iain Dale on LBC.
22 minutes past 9, we're talking about a possible ban on social media for the under-16s. Do you think the government should be bringing that in? Should there be a commitment to it in the King's Speech on the 13th of May? Or do you think, no, this is the nanny state gone mad? I don't think it is, actually. I think the state does have a responsibility to protect young people. You think, well, if it hasn't got that responsibility, what is it for? But the question is, how do you achieve the aim the laudable aim that you probably have without infringing on people's rights? And let's face it, look, social media can be a great thing for under 16s, actually. It's not all bad. But the problem is that there have been too many cases of under 16s taking their own lives because of internet bullying through social media. Now, you can say till you're blue in the face, yeah, but this is only the odd case. I mean, millions of kids don't act in that way. They are not bullied, and they're not the ones doing the bullying. I'm not sure that is a particularly brilliant argument, but if you're the parent of a child who's taken their own life because of what they've experienced on social media. What do you think we can learn from the experience of other countries, and should we wait? And do you think that if there is a ban, it could have unintended consequences? Andy says, I'm all for the ban. The more harsh, the better, in my personal opinion. That comes from someone who suffered a social media addiction, and that addiction affected my life in so many negative ways with very little positive. Social media is designed to provide a dopamine hit. Dopamine is addictive, the same way gambling draws you in. With any addiction, it requires a level of cold turkey. There will be a few weeks, maybe months of withdrawal before we begin to see normality again, and in my personal experience, what follows is a much better quality of life. One other point on this. I don't know how many of you have been to see the Magic Faraway Tree film, but it has a relevance to this, because the kids are growing up in a family environment, excuse me, where they're all on their screens. Whenever they're at home, that's all they do, look at their screens. And then suddenly they're taken out of that environment and they go and live in a barn in the middle of nowhere with no Wi-Fi. And after a while, they find that actually, they have a much nicer life when they're not looking at their screens all the time. So there is a moral to that story. The book's brilliant, by the way, Enid Blyton. Louise is a first-time caller in Redditch. Hi, Louise.
Hello, how are you?
Good, thank you. What would you like to say?
I've actually thought quite hard about how to keep my point quite simple, because I think there's quite a few things, and there's a big debate about how young people use mobile phones in general. I think looking at the social media ban as an end point to something rather than a starting point limits the purpose of what it could be for. So I've been a teacher for 15 years, and I'm also a parent of a teenager. And I think as a parent, a social media ban will give the parents that are aware that social media is a problem kind of a starting point, and empower them a little bit to be able to maybe put more controls onto their child about the social media they use. But then I also think it will let the parents that aren't tech savvy and aren't so sure of what their children are doing on their phones, it will give them a bit of a push to look more at what their children are doing on their phones. I really don't think that it's just the content that's the issue with phones. It's the nature of the internet as a whole. I mean, I am far more left than you, Ian, I have to say. But
most people are.
I do think that having children off smartphones altogether would be ideal. The way that I've seen children change in terms of how they learn, in terms of how their parents don't really parent them anymore, but where children's opinions come from about what the world is like, about who they want to be, used to come from their close friends, their teachers and their parents. But now they're kind of parented by the internet that's in their pocket. And so how they learn has completely changed. How they view the world has completely changed. So I think that a social media ban would be a starting point. But I think that when we talk about it in the media, it seems to be a solution, like the end point. I just think we should view it a little bit differently, as something that's going to empower people rather than be an end to the problem.
Well, I don't think that there is a 100% perfect solution to this, because for all the reasons you've actually pointed out, that and also, I mean, I don't know, I think you did say that a ban on phones might be a better way to go. But then, of course, if you think about it, you then deprive children of being able to go on the internet at all on their own. And I mean, the internet is a very good educational tool as well as an entertainment tool, isn't it? And so you're effectively saying, well, you can't look at anything on the internet unless you're in a school environment or you've got a computer or iPad or whatever at home.
But I think that we are also sometimes crediting children with the adult ability to process the information that they're seeing in the correct way. So they would, for example, see a video, I can't think of an example, but the way they process the information emotionally is a lot different. So if you or I were to see a video about a country that we'd never been to before, for example, we wouldn't automatically think that that entire country would be that way, or that entire half of the world would be that way. They process the information a lot differently because it doesn't kind of hang on to the experiences that they've already had. So we are crediting children with the emotional intelligence or the life experiences that adults have had. And I'm not saying that children can't do that, but not all of them can. And so the way they process what they see, they interpret it a lot different to we do. And so, for example, gaming is a really big issue. We know that there's issues with games such as Roblox. Just lots of things online completely skew their idea of the world around them, the world that's outside of them, and that then impacts on the way that they treat people around them as well. So a lot of the time now, I mean, I am a subject lead for PSHE, so my role is planning lessons for children to teach them about the dangers of online technology. But we're now having to add lessons into our curriculum that I think show that their perceptions of the world have gone back like 20, 30 years. So we're having to tell them about misogyny. We're having to teach them again about homophobia. We're hearing things come about that I thought that we were well rid of in this country about, girls getting back in the kitchen and, oh, that's so gay.
The Andrew Tate stuff, basically.
Yeah, Andrew Tate stuff, but not just him. It seems to be everywhere. And I just think the access to the internet, because of they're not adults and they don't process things and they don't have life experiences to put things into perspective like we do. We've gone back years and years in terms of their view of the people around them, so a social media ban, I feel, doesn't go as far as it should, but it is a starting point rather than looking at it as an end, as a solution to everything.
Louise, great call. Thank you very much indeed. We'll come to more calls in just a moment here on LBC. It's news headlines time. It's 9:31. Here's Daryl Jackson.
MPs have voted down a social media ban for under-16s for a second time. Lord Nash's amendment to the Children's Wellbeing and Social Bill had allowed ministers to use curfews and scrolling limits to restrict children's usage of the platforms. 2 people have been arrested over an attempted arson attack on a synagogue in North London. Police have been searching for 2 suspects after bottles thought to contain petrol were thrown at the building in Finchley overnight. And the Chancellor has called the Iran war a mistake after Donald Trump threatened to change a trade deal with the UK over its response to the conflict. America's president says the special relationship has fallen into a sad state. LBC weather: clear spells, but rain in the north and west of the UK this evening. Lows of 6 degrees.
This is LBC.
Close your eyes. Take a deep breath. And come on in to Classic FM Calm, LBC's soothing sister station. Find peace in the music with Classic FM Calm. Listen on Global Player or ask your smart speaker to play Classic FM Calm.
It's hard to concentrate when you can't shake a health worry. It can feel like there's a wall between you and the rest of the world. Like you can't be fully present.
Hello, AXA Health. How can I help?
If something's playing on your mind, AXA Health support line nurses and counsellors are ready to listen day or night. For cover that cares, search AXA Health Insurance. 24/7 health support line available to all members. Treatment for pre-existing conditions is not covered.
3, 2, 1, 0% APR on an all-electric Mini Cooper. What was that, Luton? Handling is extraordinary, centre of gravity so low, and it could be ours with a 15% deposit and 3-year term. OK, Luton, reroute me to the nearest Mini retailer now.
Land a new all-electric Mini Cooper with 0% APR. Report to your Mini retailer today. Mini UK is a credit broker. Ordered and delivered by 30th of June. PCP finance with Mini Financial Services. Subject to status. 18+. T's and C's apply. mini.co.uk/Cooper.
With up to £3,000 every year towards career growth at Amazon, I started in the warehouse, knowing I could train in things like coding or robotics. It turns my job into a career. So it means I can be who I want to be, even if I haven't quite decided who that is yet.
Amazon, opening doors with up to £3,000 every year towards career growth. Eligibility conditions about type and duration of employment apply.
Iain Dale on LBC. Text 84850.
We're talking about the possibility of the government introducing a ban on social media for under 16s. We're asking, could a ban do more harm than good? Lou says the answer to under 16 internet access is so simple. If only it was, Lou. It has to be on the source device, phone, tablet, iPad, computer. So all need proper age verification in order to use these devices, or the devices will block internet access. Although it'll never happen, as the manufacturers will potentially effectively lose revenue in the long run if verification is needed and forced. I mean, that is an interesting point, because I was reading an article the other day about all the porn sites that now have to have age verification, and the number of people using them now is a fraction of what it was. I mean, like literally 80% drop in traffic. So, I mean, that rather adds to the point that you're making there. Anyway, she continues. Or he continues, I'm not sure. Lou could be both, couldn't it? They can do this now, as they can simply send out an update for compulsory verification on all devices and computers. This will then also stop kids using VPNs, because the device simply will not load any VPN at all if it knows the child is under 16. It's the only way if any government is serious. It's a bit Big Brother, but it'll work if verification is at source on the device accessing the internet, instead of relying on big techs who don't really want to do it. Right, let's go to Farah in Southfields. Hello, Farah.
Hi, good evening, Ian. So about a month ago, I found out about a 12-year-old girl who was in the same year as my goddaughter, who took her own life. And social media was part of the reason they found out. She put herself under a lot of pressure. She's sort of a high-performing child. But social media was also sort of cited in one of the reasons that they believe that she ended her life. And she's 12. And I think girls in particular are very vulnerable to this. I'm a mother of 16-year-old twin girls, so I've seen it all, and the effect that it can have on them. And I think your previous caller was brilliant. With the PSHE lessons in school, they do offer a great deal of support. And I did see an effect on my children at one point, which was quite worrying, until sort of we managed to catch it and explain to her that not everybody looks like this, and it's airbrushed and it's AI and all of that kind of stuff. And I know my girls go to an all-girls school, and what I found out is that my girls are in year 11, so, they're 16 now. But I think from next September, they're going to ban smartphones up until the kids are 16. So they're allowed to have a brick phone. They'll be off social media and stuff like that when they're in school. The school also has some sort of technology that knocks out WhatsApp, and anytime anybody accesses any website, they can track it. I don't know how you're going to enforce the ban. I think it comes from education, which I think is what your last caller was actually saying. But I was just really shocked. My best friend is the doctor who tried to resuscitate the little girl when she got to the hospital, and it's just shocking.
It's heartbreaking, isn't it? Just winding back a bit, just tell me about the effects that social media you think has had on your own twins.
So I think it goes back to COVID, when we were all sort of locked up. I was quite poorly. I had breast cancer at the time. So, perhaps my attention wasn't on it as much. But I think a lot of children, one, they were learning remotely, so they were on their tablets all the time. Number two, in their free time, they couldn't go anywhere. And for my girls, for 11 weeks, they couldn't leave the house because I was having chemo. So I was very vulnerable, and they didn't want, they just weren't allowed to leave past the gate. So what actually happened is that one of them, they weren't the same safeguards in that you have now, where you can put a lot of parental controls. They were quite basic. So one of them saw something that really shocked her. I'm not going to say what she saw, but she was 10 years old, and it gave her nightmares because it was something that was very grown up, and she didn't understand what she was looking at. And it's when they used to have little pop-ups, all of these sorts of things. Yeah. And now technology, you can disable it. And with one of them, she thought she should look a certain way. My girls are half Irish and half Asian. So, we're a bit of a different body shape to I suppose some of the girls they're at school with. And I had to explain to her that those people aren't real. Those girls aren't real. That this is AI. It's not real. And I think also possibly because we were all sort of locked up together, they had a lot of time with their father because he was working from home, obviously. And so he was explaining these things to them. So I think, with her, I was a bit worried about how she was perceiving her own body image. And again, she's in that typical, she's extremely bright. She goes to what I would call a high-pressure school. There's an awful lot of expectation. And, girls sort of try and, when they don't feel in control, they'll try and control their bodies. So when they then see loads of social media, which is reinforcing that, it's a really, really toxic, kind of blend of all the worst things in the world. And as a parent, it's just really hard because I've got parental controls, but they do have Snapchat and they do have TikTok. They don't have anything else. But, when you put the parental controls, just like you said, in order to access, especially when they're 16, in order to access a lot of the educational sites that they need for revision or homework or whatever it is, you're constantly turning them on and off and on and off. And you can't do that the whole time. So I think what I would really like to see from the social media companies, or actually the network operators, is some form of technology whereby they can access it. There's some sort of verification process, so they can access all of those sort of sites that they need and somehow put in some sort of safeguard. It's really difficult. I'm an IT recruiter as well, so I know that some of my clients are working on this, but it's extremely difficult with the sort of tech that we have at the moment. But, as a parent of girls especially, it's just a constant nightmare. You just worry about what they're seeing.
Do you think, though, this is sort of an extreme version to what was happening before the internet, where I think there was still particularly this body image issue for young girl teenagers, where they would be driving along with their parents and you see a succession of billboard posters advertising various things where you have glamorous women, all as sort of thin as anything, and you are given this idea that is the ideal shape that every woman should aspire to. Now it's got to the point where it's not necessarily women on these posters, it's actually men who've got six packs and have perfect bodies, and young boys are sort of encouraged to think that's how they should look. And of course the internet magnifies this 1,000 times.
I think you're absolutely right, but years ago, like you said, they were on billboards or they were in magazines. Kids don't really look at magazines anymore, and we don't have the same sort of stuff on billboards. So I think it's the fact that they can access those images, in less than a second. And it's just the constant reinforcement of that. And you're absolutely right. Boys suffer from this as well. And, and they have met some tragic ends. I know of another boy who was 14. And again, social media, he was being cyberbullied, and it was a number of different things, but that was definitely thrown into the mix. So this constant reinforcement about having to be perfect and, all of this, the filters that they put on. I mean, they don't even look real. I mean, my girls, thankfully, are older now. They've seen some of the harm that social media has done. I mean, when they've seen cyberbullying, like on Snapchat, I can't remember, there was another application which was dreadful and we all had them taken off their phones. But they've actually come and told me and said, so-and-so has had this message, and I'd just call the parent. I'd want somebody to do that for my children if they saw something, or they saw.
And what reaction do you get if you do that?
Really positive. She was like, she just said to me, "Thank you so much," because I think this is when the girls are about 13, 14. It's when they start getting a little bit less chatty at the table and spending more time in their rooms and, having their personal space. Honestly, if I keep hearing those two words, I think I might just jump out the window. Personal space. I'm like, oh, God. But when I spoke to that mother, she was also a friend of mine, but I spoke to that mother and she actually got her husband on speakerphone as well. And I explained what my daughter had seen and the messages going towards her daughter, and they were horrible. I mean, I think you're right. Kids can be really mean, far more than adults. And I think girls, especially in girls' schools, it takes it to a whole different level. And because it was like an anonymous message, you couldn't see who was doing it, but it was within a specific group.
Yeah.
That's why, I obviously knew it was somebody, it was coming from their year group. And the mother was really, really, because it's how you present it. You say, my daughter's seen this. I'm concerned about your daughter. Do you want to check in on her? Because we've seen these, she's seen these, my daughter's seen these messages and, as a friend. And I've said, I'd want you to do it for me.
Yeah. A difficult conversation, though, isn't it? But I mean, okay, that in that situation, that person was your friend anyway. But if you didn't know the other parent and you sort of had to bring them up cold, I mean, that's not an easy conversation to have.
No, it's not. But I think often if it's mother to mother, so long as you're not blaming anyone. I mean, in this situation, I'd seen something which I thought, my God, if my daughter was upset for this child. For this girl that she goes, that she knew. So she was the one who just said, Mum, this isn't right, and I don't know what to do. And I said, don't worry, I know what to do. And I think if it was anyone else, and I have had tough conversations with parents in our, at school about behaviour and stuff. And I'm just not one of those people who hides away from harm. I think girls are really vulnerable, especially with all the Andrew Tate stuff and all of that stuff coming at them. So, I've had tough, not tough, but I've had sensitive conversations with people that I really don't know very well. And I think it's just the way that you go about it, and you do it from a point of concern and just say, this is what I've seen. I'm concerned. I just thought you should know. And then the parent takes it from there.
Yeah.
You don't tell people what to do. They're not your kids. I just think, you know how that phrase, it takes a village to raise a child. It takes an entire city to keep an eye on these kids when they're faced with so much social media and so much pressure. So that was all I was going to say.
Well, and you said it brilliantly, and I think you will have probably, through this conversation, encouraged other parents listening to have those kind of conversations. Thank you so much. Really, really important call, Farah. Thank you for phoning in. Right, we'll come to more of your calls in a moment. 0345 6060 973. Do you think that this social media ban, if it does come in, will actually have the desired effect, or could it be the law of unintended consequences? It's 9:47.
Coming up at 10 on LBC, James Hansen.
At 11, why is the government dragging its feet on banning social media for under-16s? But first, Kemi Badenoch has called for the parents of the Southport killer to be deported. Is she right?
James Hansen at 10. Listen on our free Global Player app or the LBC app.
Hey, Harry. Hello, mate. Got any tips? Your best bet is to head to BetVictor. Why's that? They've got more features than you can shake a stick at. They've got cash out, they've got in-play football, racing, tennis, all your favourite sports. They've got the best odds guaranteed on racing, and then there's the bet builder. And of course, you've got the lucky dip. Blimey, dip! I've got to go, fella. It's Nacho night at Casa Redknapp. And holy moly, I forgot the guacamole. Ay, caramba.
Listen to Harry and make your best bet at BetVictor. 18 plus terms and conditions apply. Gambleaware.org.
Your time is valuable. Your perspective should be too. The Economist cuts through the noise with the stories that truly shape your world.
How can you believe that a new regime won't crush you just like the previous one?
Online scams are stranger than they've ever been.
When the world's turned upside down, know which way is up. Read, watch, or listen to The Economist.
At EDF, we don't just encourage you to use less electricity. We actually reward you for it. That's why when you use less during peak times on weekdays, we give you free electricity on Sundays. How you use it is up to you. EDF. Change is in our power. Households who reduce their weekday peak electricity usage by 50% can earn up to 16 hours of free electricity per week, subject to fair usage. For all T's and C's, visit edfenergy.com/r-power.
With a new Volkswagen T-Roc. With £2,000 towards your finance deposit on the new Volkswagen T-Roc with Solutions PCP 7.9% APR representative. Test drive the T-Roc today and see why it won What Car's Best Small SUV Award.
Ordered by the 4th of May 2026. Indemnities may be required. Volkswagen Financial Services.
This is LBC with Iain Dale. Call 0345 6060 973.
9:49. David says, I'm fully behind a social media ban for under 16s. I think the objection that kids are so clever that a ban is pointless since they can get around it using VPNs, etc., is likely promoted by the social media platforms themselves, because if a parent has properly set up parental controls, which they should, then the parent will need to approve the installation of all apps on that phone, including VPNs or any other circumvention of age-gating controls. So what we need is a public information campaign for parents to get them to use the parental controls that already exist on all Android and Apple devices. That way, kids won't be able to install anything on their phones that can get around any age restrictions the government insists on. Well, that is an interesting perspective. I don't know if it's that simple. Let's take another one. This is from... it doesn't say, but she or he is in Melbourne, Australia. The social media restrictions here actually worked. They're targeted, not a blanket ban, so they've cut down harmful content and made platforms lift their game without killing it entirely. Honestly, if it means I see less of Meghan Markle and Prince Harry on my feed while they're here, I'm for it. Yeah, they're on a visit to Australia at the moment. Not a royal visit, you understand, but a visit. I'm not going to comment on that because I get into trouble whenever I say anything about them. Right, Debbie says, really enjoying your show. Thank you very much, Debbie. The main problem in regards to children having smartphones is the parents don't give them a smartphone in the first place. They don't want to be their child's parent. They want to be their friend. You're not their friend. You are the parent. So parent, she says in capital, because she's all going Donald Trumpy here. So parent in capital letters. I have great sympathy with that. I mean, look, I don't have children. I'll never have children. There's part of me that is slightly relieved that I've never had to face a lot of these questions, because I do think that there are a lot of parents out there who feel that they're helpless. That they don't understand social media. They don't understand the desire of their children to have social media, and they're sort of powerless to do anything about it. I completely empathise with that, because not every parent is as switched on as our previous caller, Farah, who I think sounded to me like an ideal parent. But not everybody is going to have that the level of either knowledge or the level of chutzpah she had to effectively ring up her child's friend's parent to say, oi, you need to have a look at this. Because a lot of people don't react well to that sort of thing, do they? Jane is in Harrow. Hello, Jane.
Hello, how are you?
Good, thank you.
Great show.
Thank
I think some really interesting callers.
Well, I'm sure you're going to be another one.
Well, I hope so. I mean, I have a slightly different perspective, and like you, I don't have children, so maybe I'm coming from a different angle, but I do manage websites and apps for a living, so I kind of understand a little bit about how these algorithms work, and I guess it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out these algorithms are incredibly sophisticated. They know more about you than you do yourself. Having said that, I think the reality is all that banning it does is means that the algorithms don't work to its full effect. So you don't know when someone comes on with a VPN if they're a 16-year-old, and then suddenly they get targeted with adult content, right? So you end up where the dark part of the web, so to speak, the bad part, gets displayed, and you know, a vanilla version, which might be okay for a 16-year-old, doesn't. So I think that's probably my first point. My second point is we should really be investing in digital literacy here, right? Like, you know, AI is obviously exploding. Where the world of work that these children go into, they're going to need to understand this sort of thing. So I just think banning it, to your first, you know, commentator's point, the guy that wrote is writing the book about user experience, is an incredibly blunt tool, and it might have some unintended consequences that we really don't want. I mean, I use, you know, for full disclosure, I'm very addicted to TikTok, but I use it all the time for, like, you know, finding out about DIY stuff, getting daily updates on politics, like things which are, I think, educational, helpful. Obviously, there's a lot of doom scrolling as well, you know, on there. And I think whether you're 2 or you're 92, social media is addictive, and we need to lean into that, and we need to put controls in place, and we need to put onus back on the, you know, on the owners of these platforms and these big tech giants. So we say to them, you need to implement a ban. Guess what happens? They implement a ban. They say, I've done it, and then there's still a bunch of 16-year-olds on their platform, like, you know, accessing illicit content, and they say, well, I banned everyone, so I'm not even going to bother regulating my platform. I think is essentially the argument you come to.
I mean, you say you don't have children, but you will know a lot of people with children. Is this a subject that is really a matter of discussion among your friends at the moment?
I would say so. I'd say, I mean, a lot of my friends are teachers, and I think the phones, I personally think that phones in school are a terrible idea. I mean, I never grew up with phones in school, and it was, you know, there was no issue with that. So I think that definitely gets in the way of distraction in child learning. But for me, I mean, people use the argument around this is about, you know, the banning is similar to banning to having seatbelts installed. Well, actually, no, it's about banning the car. And for me, not having phones in school was like the seatbelt. It's like, what are the levers that we can put in place to try and control it? So you can't have it at school, and you can basically see vanilla version of these sites which show you only educational content that is relevant for your age. So I think that is it. I mean, I have quite a few kind of nephews and nieces that are like 2. I see my 2-year-old niece, like, she's looking into the tablet, like her head is about to explode. You take it away from her, she has a mental breakdown, and she's trying to scroll in to see, you know, to see things on there, and that, you know, that's at 2. So imagine what it's going to be like when she's sort of 22. So I think I see that side of the argument, in that I understand it's incredibly addictive. Young minds are growing. I was really saddened by the last caller, and, you know, is that young girl. But I also think, like, government, generally speaking, is never the best people to understand the technology that sits behind it. They need to take some advice from experts.
Well, you see, that is the problem. There is this general rule of thumb that legislation is always about 10, even 20 years behind the technology. And I fear that's the situation that we're going to find ourselves in again, that a law will be introduced for the best of reasons, but it won't have kept up with the technological developments.
For sure. I couldn't agree more. And I just think they're so behind on this, honestly. They've released lots of bills, and it kind of reminds me with, when they brought in the whole thing about data privacy and cookies. Well, what happens now? You just go on a website, they say, we're tracking your cookies. You say, okay, fine, and click off. It doesn't really have the impact that they want to, that they just kind of tick a box. Okay, we've done that, let's move on. But they don't really understand the core of what's going on behind it, how addictive these platforms are. Ultimately, we need to basically be saying to Facebook and to TikTok and to, you can't operate in this country unless you make sure you regulate your content. That's not just for teenagers, by the way. That's for adults as well. Some of the content that's on there is absolutely appalling, horrendous. Some of the comments are horrendous, but they don't have any incentive to do it because effectively we're not regulating for that. We're regulating for the individuals, which to me doesn't make any sense at all.
Thank you very much indeed, Jane. Another great call. Some really interesting perspectives in this hour, and thank you so much for some great calls. Well, Mo says, look at the details of the European countries banning access to social media for children of a certain age. None of them legislates for enforcement. They're all very weak headline-grabbing approaches. Another text here, again from Mo. Iain, no, I've already done that one. This is from... does it say? No, it doesn't say. Do put your names on text. I've heard this nonsense about the solution to the ills of social media being education for years. It didn't work. It never will. If someone was shoving packets of cocaine through your child's bedroom door, packets of cocaine through your child's bedroom door every day, would you try to educate them about the perils of drug use? No, you do everything possible to cut the supply off at source. Thank you all very much for your participation in the programme tonight. Even if you just listened, that's absolutely fine. Coming up at 1 on LBC, it's James Max. But right now, in for Ben Kentish, here's James Hansen.
Thank you, Ian. Good evening. Coming up.
The social media companies admit that they can have highly effective age verification, and the E-Safety Commission in Australia has now put the squeeze on them to do that.
MPs have tonight voted against banning social media for under-16s. At 11, why is the government dragging its feet on this? But first,
Rwanda is a safe country now. If they don't have citizenship here, then